Parental guidance recommended. This is an original work of fiction. Any similarities to persons or companies living, dead, in operation, and or currently not in operation is purely coincidental. While there are no naughty words, Pudgy suggests parents listen to story first and make decision accordingly whether they can watch this podcast. If you like this story, please consider pressing the like button. Remember to subscribe to Pudgy so you do not miss out on the next story podcast. Thank you everyone for your support. Autumn had come to the forest, and the trees were full of vibrant yellow and orange colors. The occasional red and brown peeked through, while the tall, silent pines stood in their usual greenery. The temperatures first stayed warm, but had grown cooler, and more importantly, the rains had returned. As the drought finally ended, the plants of the forest had started to recover just as they prepared to sleep for the approach of winter. It had been several weeks since Pudgy returned from his adventure to rescue Angeliki from the Kaiser and his evil forces at Mount Rainier. After a long period of rest and recovery, the hedgehog had settled back into the normal routine of daily life. Halloween had come and went, with a variety of festivities that were associated with it. Pudgy opted out of his usual scary ghost costume in favor of a happy jack-o'-lantern. Argente really got into the holiday and laughed while Cobalt wrapped her in bandages to become a silver fox mummy. Cobalt wore the same scary monster outfit as always, and everyone helped him pass out candy to the visiting neighbor children. The night ended with cleanup, silly Halloween movies, candy, and lots of hugs. The temperatures had grown much cooler as fall progressed. This resulted in many small trips to retrieve firewood, so the underground home's wood stove could be fueled to heat the home as well as cook. Each day, after the chores were done and the hoppers were full of firewood, Pudgy would play with his woodland friends. Shortly after his return, Pudgy's beaver friends had decided to relocate their dam to a spot further downstream, below the spot where the water wheel was located. The drought had reinforced what Cobalt had been trying to tell them, and the spot where their pond was originally located dried up with scant water coming to refill. Cobalt helped them relocate the various parts of the dam to the new spot, as well as trench out with a shovel a deeper spot for their various components. He moved in large rocks to form the basis of a pond. The decision to move turned out to be a good one, as when the heavy fall rains returned to Pennsylvania, the creek began to flow once more. The increase of water volume restored the water flow, and the new pond and dam location caught much more water. Their pond became much deeper, and with a greater variety of small trees nearby, the beavers had access to more material to make their home. The gray fluffy bunnies also helped, though their definition of help was always a bit suspect. They spent much of their time trying to jump across the pond rather than move material or help the beavers reinforce the dam. They would use the various gathered materials to make a catapult and then try to see if they could launch themselves over the pond. The beavers laughed and continued their daily work, as the realization that winter was coming kept their focus in check. Thankfully, Pudgy and Argente were of more help, and the preparations were soon to be completed. A couple of days later, the critters watched from their respective spots in the forest as the man walked by and pulled a wagon full of supplies. They knew he was going to Pudgy's house, but all wiggled their noses trying to determine what activity would happen today. Cobalt visited every other day to his little friend's home to check on things and bring supplies to prepare for the coming winter season. In the time that had passed, several repairs and upgrades were made to the underground home. The security barricades that had been reworked in such a way that they now resembled storm shutters and storm doors. The big rocks that disguised the home remained, but now Pudgy had a little stone wall that he could hide behind, as well as host his friends in a courtyard of sorts. Reaching down, Cobalt knocked on the door. In a couple of moments, the little door opened, and Pudgy peeked out, wiggling his nose while speaking. "Hi, Cobalt! Pudgy's baking bread! It should be ready soon. Pudgy will open up the big room doors." The hedgehog darted back inside of his home and shut the front door. As Cobalt stood and smiled, he looked at the wagon. It was a wooden one with removable sides, though rarely did he take them out. It was painted a deep green and the wheels were rusty red ones. It had been in the family for many years, though eventually one day he may need to get a new one. But the occasional paint touch-ups and oil meant that it would stay in operation for a good while yet. As the man pulled the wagon around by its long black metal handle, the items inside jostled and rolled around. The big doors were starting to open to the meeting room for the underground home. Design limitations meant that the man could not add anything to the outside like a set of storm doors, but COBALT had been able to add door reinforcements as well as a coating of fire-resistant paint as well, in case of further attacks on the home. Inside, the man had constructed a series of door supports that Pudgy could move into place to further prop the door to prevent forced entry. The interior of the big room had not changed much. A banquette seat with a green leatherette cushioned bench was along the sides and back of the room in a U shape. The man had created little doors on the base of the banquette, which allowed Pudgy to store things underneath the seat. The man had reserved one side, though, and placed a locking metal gun safe inside the bench. They were not going to be caught unprepared once again, should the Kaiser, or anyone else for that matter, come to mess with the hedgehog again. To the inside and right of the big doors were two metal doors with a round top that were split down the middle. That's where the batteries were kept, as well as the electrical system. At first, due to the drought, the home was not generating the power it needed. COBALT had to exchange out the batteries on a semi-frequent basis so they could be recharged at his home across the forest. Now that a solar panel was wired in properly and generating power, the man did not have to exchange out the entire set of batteries. The main limitation was that the home's primary power was still the water wheel, though now with the return of the flowing creek, the water wheel was able to turn, thus allowing the alternator to generate power. Pudgy peeked over the door jamb and watched as his human friend started to enter the room and open the power room doors. Sticking his head inside, the man checked on the batteries and the panel. Once he was satisfied, he shut the doors and then quickly grabbed Pudgy to draw him in for a hug. The critter laughed and hugged back, while his friend repositioned himself and sat down on the banquette seat. Several happy moments passed, and Pudgy looked up and wiggled his nose as he spoke. Pudgy's glad COBALT came over. Hey, what's in the wagon?
I'm glad to see you're well, Pudgy. Odds and ends, but I think we're good for the winter now. I also got the heater for the room, so I need to install that today.
Setting the hedgehog onto the banquette, the man stood and started to head to the opening. The big room, as Pudgy referred to it, was about the size of a small garden shed. It was 5 feet wide by 6 feet deep with a 5 feet high ceiling. There was no easy way to stand up if you were a human, but with the visiting woodland critters, they were all amazed at the giant room in the underground home. In the warmer months, the big room was fine. However, with the cold of winter approaching, a small supplemental heat source was a good idea. After researching tiny homes, the man was able to locate a boat heater. It was not large and could easily fit on one wall. After securing a metal fire plate to the wall with his cordless drill, COBALT started to install the heater. Pudgy watched for a moment before returning inside of his home through the interior door. The bread in the oven was still baking, and if the hedgehog left it unattended, it might burn. As Pudgy scampered up, the little critter peeked inside of his wood stove. The scent of fresh bread filled his home, but the loaves were not done yet, so the stove's door stayed shut. The sounds of COBALT working echoed throughout the home, and as the critter was just about to turn, he heard a knock, knock, knock on the door. Scampering over, Pudgy opened the door and smiled as 2 gray fluffy bunnies were there.
Hi, Pudgy! Hi, Pudgy!
The 2 excited bunnies spoke while waving their paws and bouncing happily. The hedgehog waved as he returned their greeting. Hi, Beatrice! Hi, Bobby! Please come in! Pudgy stepped back and watched as the bunnies hopped through the door and into the underground home. As the hedgehog host shut the door and turned to speak to his new guests. Pudgy's baking bread. It should be ready soon. Let Pudgy make tea. Do not mind the noise. COBALT is here to work on the big room today. While heading to the sink to fill up his tea kettle, the 2 bunnies settled into an area located on the opposite side of the room with cushions on the floor. They watched the little hedgehog at his sink, and COBALT worked through the open interior doorway that led to the big room. His bunny friends were happy to have their hedgehog friend back. It was agreed upon by everyone throughout the forest that they hoped the days of the scary monsters in the forest was soon to be a distant memory. With the water starting to come to a boil in the kettle on the wood stove, the hedgehog turned to his guests while his bunny friends started to tell him all about the latest forest gossip. The beavers were much happier in their new spot, and the birds were all starting to head south flock by flock since winter was approaching. Mr. Bear had been laying in supplies due to the upcoming winter as well, and had been fairly active rummaging around the humans' nearby homes. The tea kettle started to whistle, which made Pudgy turn around once again to the stove. Taking a small towel from the counter, the critter picked up the hot metal handle of the tea kettle, pulling it aside to a stone plate on the counter. The tea kettle's top cover was opened, and there was a little ceramic jar with a smiling bear on it nearby. That's where the critter kept his tea leaves. Carefully, Pudgy opened both lids and spooned in the right amount of loose tea leaves into the kettle. Sealing each accordingly, the hedgehog turned with the tea kettle and carried it over to a small round table beside the gray fluffy bunny rabbits. The trio of critters sat happily in Pudgy's underground home and listened to Cobalt finish up his task. It was not long until their curiosity got the better of them, and the man quickly found 2 bunnies and a hedgehog trying to squeeze around his legs to look at what he had installed. There was now a small green tank of propane connected to the heater via a bright yellow flexible pipe, which was clipped into place with a silver clamp.
With this, your big room will be heated when you have guests over. For obvious reasons, please do not touch this. I need to be here to ensure safety.
All the critters nodded while Pudgy wiggled his nose as he spoke. Does this mean you can sleep over more? Cobalt smiled and gently picked up each critter one at a time to show them what he had been up to, then gave them a hug and then sat them down. Pudgy got an extra hug too, which the bunnies noticed and pouted. After setting the critters down on the concrete floor, the man reached into the wagon to get out a liter bottle of cola and then sat down on the banquette seat.
I think I heard a tea kettle go off, Pudgy.
Cobalt said, which prompted the hedgehog to scurry back inside of the living area in his home. The man smiled and then reached over to the gas valve and opened it. Pressing the striker button, a spark ignited the flame, and soon a series of dancing flames were flickering within the glass front of the heater. The day was cool, though not enough to warrant the heater, but Cobalt still wanted to test it out first. When the bunnies and the hedgehog returned with their cups of tea, everyone looked up and noticed the heater. The room was already starting to warm, despite the big doors being open. As everyone sipped their drinks, Pudgy looked up at Cobalt. Cobalt, can Pudgy ask you a question? His human friend smiled and nodded while watching his hedgehog friend take a sip of tea and swallow quickly before speaking. Can Pudgy host Thanksgiving this year?
Yes, that sounds good to me, Pudgy. My family's going to be away this year, and we cannot do the big get-together as normal. Who are you thinking of inviting?
We want to come.
Pudgy nodded as he narrated. Pudgy wants to invite Cobalt, Beatrice Bunny, Bobby Bunny, Mr. and Mrs. Field Mouse, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, Argente, Mr. Bear. Pudgy would invite Angeliki, but unsure if she wants to come, given everything that's happened. Cobalt smiled as he rubbed his chin, pondering while he spoke.
I think that would be a great idea. I can get the ingredients and then cook it on the fire outside, just like your last party.
The man said with a contemplative look as his mind trailed off to the past. Pudgy bounced as he spoke. And Pudgy can make stuff too. Pudgy already has many things stocked away. The fun visit continued throughout the afternoon. After shutting down the heater, the big room was closed when Cobalt left to head back to his home. The hedgehog excitedly made out lists on little pieces of paper, trying to plan out the menu and place settings. In the days that followed, Pudgy made little invitations, Pa delivered them, and all his nearby friends accepted. Argente bounced as she had never heard of Thanksgiving and was curious what it was. The Silver Fox helped Pudgy deliver the invitation to Mr. Bear, and unlike their last trip to their friend's cabin, it was uneventful in the cool forest. The cabin was being secured for the winter with piles of firewood stacked around it. Mr. Bear was sitting on his porch, smoking from a long pipe when the Silver Fox and Hedgehog arrived. The large brown bear happily accepted when the invitation for dinner was made by Pudgy. The hedgehog's parties were fun, and such an event was not to be missed in their forest. Thanksgiving was soon approaching, and the bear waved as his two friends said their goodbyes. It had been far too long since everyone got together. Just like the trip to Mr. Bear's home, the return trip was safe and happy. The trees continued to lose their leaves as the night quickly arrived. After dropping the hedgehog off at his home, Argente headed a short distance to her cottage. Each day, the hedgehog baked all manner of hedgehog-sized things, breads and cookies and pies and many other wonderful things. When the sun first rose on Thanksgiving morning, Pudgy woke up excitedly and lit his wood stove. The hedgehog watched through his round kitchen window as Cobalt was heading over in a heavy red and black wool coat with a wagon full of supplies, as well as the big blue cooler on wheels. The hedgehog excitedly opened his door and scampered out to meet his friend in front of his underground home. "Hi, Cobalt!" The man smiled and knelt to scoop up his little friend and hug him gently.
Hello, Pudgy. Today's the big day.
The hedgehog bounced happily in the man's hands, and when he was sat back down on the ground, Pudgy scurried inside to open the big, bifold round doors to the meeting room. Cobalt pulled the wagon and cooler up to the spot outside of the doors and then retrieved his long axe. After locating several recently fallen trees, the man chopped and gathered a good pile of firewood to start the cooking fire. After several trips to make the wood pile and gather round stones to form a fire ring, the man got to work to build the fire. Pudgy would check on his friend occasionally and then head back inside to prepare for dinner. Pudgy did not understand what Cobalt's mother had said a long time ago when she said that Thanksgiving was the holiday meal with the most work. Now the little hedgehog knew, as he used every pot, pan, and dish to cook. The critter was now having to wash things to be able to continue. With the fire roaring outside, a good bed of coals started to form, as Cobalt got out the Dutch ovens he brought over from the wagon. The field mice were the first to show up at Pudgy's home and were bouncing excitedly. They stayed away from Cobalt since it was not safe to approach with a large fire crackling. However, soon the hedgehog and the mice were sitting nearby Cobalt on a large flat rock, watching him set up the ovens, as well as a tripod with a chain to hang pots from. The first order of business was a pot of coffee, which was quickly prepared and hung over the fire. The top of the cooler had a cutting board and a flat surface to work from, so the man started to prepare the various foods and tossed them into respective pots or ovens. The bunnies arrived next with Argente, who scampered with Pudgy around the fire ring at a safe distance. Every animal would stop occasionally, watching Cobalt prepare a large turkey. Since Mr. Bear would be coming over for dinner, the man had bought the largest turkey the store had in stock. After checking the inside for mysterious treasures and getting out the gravy packet and some sort of bag labeled giblets, Cobalt lowered the turkey into the Dutch oven. The man added a good amount of liquid from a container that said turkey broth inside the oven before moving the lid on top. Using a shovel, coals were added to the top of the oven, while the humans started to write things in chalk on a nearby large flat stone. Ordinarily, Cobalt would use his various electronic devices and timers, but he only had his phone and one timer, so he was doing it the old school way, which worked best. The silver fox patted over and pointed with her paw.
"What is there, Cobalt?"
Oh, cooking times. The turkey will take the longest to cook, so this is the time when I put it in. Dutch ovens cook very efficiently, so it should be quicker than my oven back home.
The man smiled as he rubbed Argente's back gently, while the silver fox nodded and then scampered back over to the other critters. All started to wave as Mr. Bear was walking up to Pudgy's home in the distance, pulling a big wagon behind him. The excited bouncing critters waved and scampered around the bear. Cobalt turned, smiled, and waved. The large brown bear grinned and unhooked straps from around his back. Inside of his wagon were two exceptionally large, freshly baked pies. One was an apple pie, complete with a lattice of crust, as well as a traditional pumpkin pie. The humans smiled and laughed.
Okay, Mr. Bear brought the pies. Now we can start dinner.
The bear laughed happily as he sat down beside the crackling fire, looking at the various pots bubbling.
Pudgy, host, Cobalt, George.
Yeah, but I'd gladly help him host these get-togethers.
While the hours passed, the hedgehog passed out little cakes and breads to everyone. Hedgehog-sized treats were fun and did not interfere with one's appetite for dinner. Well, except for the field mice, who quickly filled up when they were offered their yummy treat. Pudgy had silly games, and the catapult came out to launch the bunnies over the creek. However, when Cobalt pulled the lid from the main oven to check on the turkey, a waft of yummy smells filled the air. All eyes snapped to the fire, and everyone headed over. The man sliced a tiny bit of turkey and tasted it.
Turkey's ready.
When Cobalt called out that the turkey was ready, Even Mr. Bear started to bounce excitedly. The man set up a long white folding table that was low to the ground and began to arrange things. The table was not to eat at, it was to assemble dinner plates. All manner of yummy foods had been prepared. Roasted turkey, breads, stuffing, mashed potatoes with gravy, corn, carrots glazed with brown sugar, and maple sticks that were coated with syrup. The beavers were last to arrive, which was silly because they were the closest to Pudgy. While the other foods did not interest them, the syrup-coated maple sticks were all theirs to munch upon. Using the plates that Pudgy had, Cobalt made tiny plates of food for the assembled critters. Each would wait patiently and then take their plate to sit nearby to the fire. Mr. Bear's portion was much larger and placed on a metal platter. Cobalt served Pudgy, then himself, before turning to the assembled group.
Bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. I hope you like it. Go ahead and eat. Hey, we have enough for seconds as well, so don't be bashful.
Just as Cobalt was about to sit down on a rock by the fire, the man watched as a woman in a long white dress with a feathered shoulder piece approached. She was leaning on a white oak staff and had soft blue eyes. Cobalt waved as she approached.
Angeliki, I'm glad you could make it.
The daughter of the goddess Hecate had arrived and waved at the assembled group of woodland critters. She giggled when Pudgy scampered up and hugged her ankle, then watched as the critter scampered back to munch upon yummy things. As the woman reached a nearby spot to sit by the fire, Cobalt served her a human-sized, strong paper plate worth of many yummy things. Many trips were made by the critters, asking for a little more of something by pointing their paw. Cobalt would stop eating and serve them happily. Angeliki giggled and marveled at how the turkey was so moist. She did not know what the recipe was, but she would ask Cobalt later about it. The turkey did not last long, and soon the stuffing disappeared shortly thereafter. There was a miscalculation regarding the amount of food for leftovers, but that was also due to having to plan for a brown bear in addition to multiple critters.
Okay, Mr. Bear. You're in charge of Christmas dinner.
The large brown bear was rubbing his belly with his paw as he responded.
White idea. Do that.
As the food disappeared, there was only one thing left: pie. The man started to serve the wonderful pies that Mr. Bear had made this morning. Cobalt also brought tubs of whippy cream, which everyone enjoyed, even the beavers. As Angeliki was looking at the pumpkin pie with a Pudgy-sized 5-inch tall pile of whipped cream, she spoke.
Cobalt, I think you put too much cream on it, but I shall persevere.
Turns out, there is never such a thing as too much whippy cream when it comes to pie. Pudgy had a full belly, and so did all of his friends. The bunnies were laying on the ground, round full bellies out and their paws in the air as they said,
Best party ever, Pudgy!
As the sunlight started to fade, a large log was added to the fire. Soon the fire began to roar once more and cast its light and heat all around. While Pudgy checked on his guests, everyone was sitting and laughing. Tales were being told of the various events of the forest, and Angeliki was sitting quietly listening. After all the horror that had happened recently, a fun get-together in the woods was in order. Cobalt was cleaning up the various ovens and pots using a bucket of heated water from the creek. Though inside the wagon, a glass bottle caught her eye, and the demigoddess pointed.
Cobalt, what is in the bottle?
Laughing, the man turned, reached into the wagon to retrieve a bottle of bourbon, and handed her the bottle along with a couple metal mugs of various sizes.
Yes, I know there are better brands, but this is all I had, and I do not drink that often. I prefer pie with whippy cream. But go ahead, pop it open. Hey, Mr. Bear, you want a drink?
Angeliki nodded with a smile as she opened the bottle and began to pour the spirits into the various mugs provided. The bear's mug was almost the size of a beer stein, while Cobalt and Angeliki's were the size of a shot glass. The man sat beside Angeliki and accepted the shot of liquor. With his drink in hand, the man raised his glass and said,
To Pudgy!
The others nodded while Angeliki returned the toast and sipped the strong liquor. The bottle was quickly emptied, and Angeliki was laughing. Pudgy stopped by and sniffed the empty bottle laying on the ground. Ew! That's the icky stuff.
Yeah, I don't drink it that often. Only one shot for me. I have to walk home.
Cobalt patted his hedgehog friend on the head while the group of adults laughed heartily. They watched and smiled at the hedgehog who was scampering around behind them with his other animal guests. As the night progressed, One by one, the guests of the party began to depart. As the full critter scampered home, Pudgy found himself at the fire with Cobalt and Angeliki, watching Mr. Bear head to his home at the opposite end of the forest. Pudgy's glad everyone could come and had a good time.
Yes, Pudgy, I agree. After everything, we needed this. I see she's a power drinker just like myself.
Angeliki had fallen asleep and was now leaning on Cobalt. Pudgy bounced as soon as he snuggled up against his human friend on the opposite side. They watched the fire as it danced on the logs, and the stars shone in the clear skies above. Pudgy yawned sleepily and fell asleep beside his friend, his belly full and his mind at ease. Cobalt smiled at the two of them, hugged both gently, drawing happy sounds from both the hedgehog and the woman. Pudgy sighed happily as he said, "I'm thankful for my friends." Angeliki had dozed off from a wonderful Thanksgiving meal and the after-dinner libation. When she awoke, the woman found herself leaned up against Cobalt. Yawning while she giggled softly, the man was tending the fire, and she pulled away from him to sit up properly. Her sleepy blue eyes saw the man was holding Pudgy in his lap. While smiling outwardly, the demigoddess felt a bit embarrassed for falling asleep. She spoke as she yawned while rubbing her eyes.
Oh my. Cobalt, I am so sorry about that. How long was I asleep for?
Not too long, actually. Maybe an hour. Pudgy wore himself out, too.
The man said with a smile while holding the hedgehog in his lap.
This was such a wonderful party. You two should be very proud of yourselves. After all that has happened, everyone needs a good time to rest and enjoy life.
Angeliki spoke while she noticed that the stars were shining brightly in the night skies above. Cobalt nodded while he gently petted Pudgy as he slept.
I hope this peace lasts, at least for a little while. I built too large of a fire, so I will need to stay up late tonight to ensure it's safely looked after. Can you take Pudgy back to his home and tuck him in?
The two nodded in agreement, and Angeliki gently scooped up Pudgy from the man's lap. She stood, turned, and then started the short walk back to the underground home. The big round bifold doors were still open, and so the demigoddess entered through there. The hedgehog sleepily stirred and hugged her while the woman giggled as she knelt. A return of the warm embrace occurred before Pudgy was gently set down on the concrete floor. The little hedgehog spoke. "Thank you for coming. Night-night." Angeliki stood and backed out of the underground home and into the forest. It was not long until the bifold doors started to close. She turned to look back up at Cobalt by the fire and sighed happily before turning her attention back to Pudgy's home. The tiny front door was closed, and one by one, the little lights inside turned off. A wisp of smoke escaped from the chimney that was atop of his home as it peeked out from the ground. Walking back to Cobalt, Angeliki retrieved her staff and spoke.
Cobalt, Pudgy is back within his home and is retired for the evening. Thank you for inviting me, but I must take my leave now.
The man smiled and waved as he spoke.
You are very welcome. I'm unsure, but Mr. Bear is talking about hosting Christmas. We'll let you know if that happens.
The woman smiled as she nodded, waved, and then with a flick of her wrist, turned into a cloud of mist. The demigoddess faded away and disappeared silently. Several hours passed in the cool, dark forest, and once the fire had died down, Cobalt wet the embers several times with creek water using an ice cream plastic bucket he kept in the wagon. The man stayed in the dark forest for a time to ensure the fire did not relight itself, and then covered the fire pit with a thick layer of dirt and rocks. Once confirming everything was indeed safe, Cobalt returned to his home with his various assortment of supplies loaded into the wagon behind him. The day after Thanksgiving is usually the day everyone sleeps in, and this year was no different. Pudgy snug in his underground home, the bunnies in their warren, the field mice in their home, Argente in her underground cottage, Mr. Bear in his cabin, and Cobalt at his house all slept soundly and serene. It was not until early afternoon that Pudgy stirred and sleepily opened his eyes. "Best party ever!" the hedgehog excitedly exclaimed as he slid out of his warm bed and scampered into his little bathroom and shut the door. While not the human standards, Cobalt was incredibly wise to have installed facilities to relieve oneself inside the home. Pudgy would not have to go outside during winter again. Thank goodness. After the hedgehog had prepared himself accordingly, he exited the bathroom and then scampered over to his wood stove. It was a well-rehearsed routine to load the stove with firewood and light the fire. In a matter of minutes, the wood started to crackle, so the critter shut the firebox door. Pudgy walked over to the sink to wash the soot from his paws. While looking out of his round kitchen window, he saw a sight that he had not seen in an incredibly long time. Tears started to form in his eyes as the hedgehog watched a green dragon fly through the trees and land at the former site of his cabin. There was now a small pond which stood there, which, until the arrival of the beavers, served as the main swimming spot for his friends. The hedgehog scampered quickly to his front door, opened it excitedly, lifted the storm door up to the porch position, scurried through the large rocks to disguise the front of his home, and called out excitedly, "Xylenia!" The dragoness turned her head around while she scanned the area until she caught sight of the hedgehog running through the autumn leaves towards her. Waving her claw-tipped paw at her friend, the dragoness called out,
Pudgy!
The hedgehog quickly reached his dragon friend and began to hug her leg tightly. Pudgy was crying, which made her sniffle, as the dragoness pulled him in close for a big hug. Xylenia sat as her tail wrapped around her body. Neither friend spoke for a long time in the near quiet forest, until the hedgehog looked up at the dragon's smiling face and spoke while he wiggled his nose. "Pudgy's so glad you came back, Xylenia." The green dragon smiled as only she could, nodding as she spoke.
Yes, Pudgy. I so wanted to come back sooner. I was not able to until now, since my mother has kept me so busy at the North Pole helping with Santa's operations. Pudgy, you've gotten much older since I last saw you. And where is your cabin, for that matter?
The confused dragon's silver eyes looked down at her hedgehog friend, noticing the gray streaks throughout his fur and quills. The hedgehog bounced happily in her paw as he nodded and spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. "Oh, COBALT had to build Pudgy a new house after the cabin was blown up. Please put Pudgy down so Pudgy can show you to new Pudgy home. It's just up the hill from here." The dragon blinked, nodded, and sat the critter down onto the ground as she tried to process that the cabin was destroyed. The forest, while looking almost the same, was different in places. There was now a water wheel disguised by rocks and plants turning in the creek, and a beaver dam had been built with a big pond forming. Pudgy's original home was also a pond with cattails growing inside of it. The dragoness slowly walked behind the hedgehog as he scampered up the hill behind where his cabin once stood. Xylenia noticed that there were 2 round wooden doors and 2 round windows peeking out from the ground, as well as several huge rocks and barricades scattered about. When the 2 friends reached the front of the underground home, there was a round hedgehog-sized door with a light brown wood stain which Pudgy opened and scampered inside. The dragoness leaned down to peek inside to see an actual home inside with walls and furnishings. Sighing, the dragoness was too big to fit within the home, but soon noticed that Pudgy was scampering through the round window towards the much larger round door. There was a similar stain, though weather fading had begun, and the door was split down the middle. There were metal reinforcements as well as huge hinges reinforced with the screw heads purposely stripped. The home seems to have been fortified recently, which made the dragoness worry and wonder just exactly what has been happening here since she left. Much to her surprise, the big round door started to split in the middle and fold inwards to reveal a much bigger room. There was a big seat with a green set of cushions wrapped around the back of the room. Once the doors were fully open, Pudgy peeked over the lower door jamb. "Please come inside, Xylenia. Pudgy will get tea and cookies." The green dragon giggled as she concentrated to reduce her size. It was still a tight fit as Xylenia turned around and backed into the big room carefully. There was fine wood paneling with a light oak stain, little LED light sconces, as well as the big cushy seat. There was another small round metal door to the left with a sign from COBALT that read, "Do not open." Xylenia smiled as she sat down on the concrete floor, but craned her neck to look inside another round door to the right. The dragoness could just barely see into Pudgy's home, with all manner of furnishings as well as the excited hedgehog making tea.
My goodness, Pudgy. COBALT and you built this home? It is wonderful. I really love it.
The hedgehog bounced and waved. "Pudgy has a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, and everything here." Xylenia pointed with her left claw to the metal door.
What is over there? To the left.
The hedgehog scampered over to the interior door and nodded as he pointed with his paw and spoke. That is the power room where the batteries are kept and other electrical things. Cobalt told Pudgy do not go in there unless it's necessary. When water wheel turns in the creek, it makes power for Pudgy's home. The hedgehog quickly returned with a cobalt-sized mug of tea, pushing it along the floor. Green Dragon giggled as she continued to shrink in size as she spoke.
Why, thank you, my dear friend.
The hedgehog went back inside the interior living quarters of his home to bring out a box of cookies, then back inside to retrieve his tea, before returning to the big room to sit in front of the dragoness. Pudgy sipped steaming tea from a tiny mug, while Xylenia smiled as she scanned the gears that allowed the doors to be opened by Pudgy with her silver eyes. After nibbling a rectangular shortbread cookie, Xylenia looked down at Pudgy.
Pudgy, I have noticed your home has some reinforcements. Why is that?
Pudgy took a deep breath and then started to tell the grand tale of what had happened since last they met. His adventures to the moon and back, of Civil War ghosts, of his river journey to New Orleans and back, the ghosts of the Revolutionary War, the ghosts and monsters of World War I, and then his recent adventure to save Angeliki from Mount Rainier. The dragon listened with her mouth agape, claws shaking badly. Her little friend had had more adventures in the last year than some have had in a lifetime, and now monsters were attacking his home and going after his friends. The dragoness became upset, which was not a good thing, as that meant she would lose her concentration. If that were to occur, she would revert to her full-sized form. Xylenia grabbed Pudgy and hugged him tight while she started to cry.
I should never have left you. Look what happened.
A soft voice rang out from outside the open doorway.
I keep telling him to stay home, but he doesn't listen.
The dragon looked up and saw a silver fox sitting outside the doorway. Her fur had black undertones with fine silver ends and a fluffy white striped tail. Pudgy looked up at Xylenia. Xylenia, this is Argentée. She's Pudgy's friend, too. Pudgy met her on the New Orleans trip, and she came up to live here. The dragon's silver eyes locked onto the fox's brown eyes. It was not long until the two female animals came to an understanding quickly. Argentée padded inside the room and sat while her tail wrapped around her body, just like the dragon. The silver fox picked up a cookie and nibbled, while Pudgy scooted out of the dragon's grasp to go back inside to his kitchen and get a hot tea for the silver fox. Argentée made small talk with the dragon in disbelief that Pudgy knew a dragon, but she appeared to be nice. When the hedgehog returned with the tea kettle, Pudgy refilled everyone's cups. Xylenia asked a couple clarifying questions due to some points that were glossed over during the hedgehog's tale. Argentée looked up at the green dragon and spoke with a curious look.
If I may ask, why are you here?
That would make sense to explain why I am here. I'm sorry. I was overloaded with hedgehog adventure stories.
The two females giggled while Pudgy bounced and nibbled on the cookie. He looked up expectantly at his dragon friend, listening intently. The dragoness reached down to a fine red velvet belt with a pouch of similar construction sewn into it, lined with white fur. Xylenia retrieved an ornament which seemed to be made of glass, though was a funny, murky white color.
Glitter, are you there?
The ornament began to glow with a soft white light, and then floated down to be at eye level of Argentée. Inside the ornament, a face began to appear slowly out of focus. Another female voice giggled wildly.
Xylenia, I am so glad you got there safe. Did you find Pudgy? Is he okay?
Yes, he's fine, and we are having tea now. He showed me his new underground home that his friend Cobalt helped him to build.
As the dragoness smiled and nodded, the excited elvish woman came into clear focus within the floating ornament. The elf smiled and waved at Pudgy, which the hedgehog returned in kind as he spoke. Hi, Glitter! Pudgy wishes you could have come too.
I wish so too, but we elves cannot exist in your world for long periods of time. Thankfully, Xylenia can exist in both worlds, so that is why we sent her there. Pudgy, I want to hear everything.
Once more, Pudgy told his grand tale of adventure. Xylenia giggled as she realized that each time her little friend told his tale, a little bit more information would be added. Later, she would suggest that Pudgy write down these tales to preserve them for the future, once she had a moment to speak privately with the hedgehog. At the end of the tale, the elvish woman looked sick. There were other elves in the background behind her that also looked horrified at what had been happening in the forest. After several moments, Glitter regained her composure and spoke.
Pudgy, that is an epic tale, to say the very least. I will inform Santa of this later.
Argente pawed at the ornament, but it skirted away before she could touch it. Xylenia giggled as she pointed with one of her claws and spoke.
It's magic. Please do not touch it.
The silver fox nodded as she nibbled upon another cookie. Pudgy looked at Glitter as he spoke. Is something wrong, Glitter? The fair-skinned elf's color was starting to return to her face as a shaking hand pulled a cup of hot chocolate to her mouth. After a long draw of the steaming, sugary beverage, she nodded as she spoke.
Pudgy, we have a catastrophe. Mrs. Claus is missing. Each year, Mrs. Claus visits your world to do charitable acts. For some reason, she stopped communicating with us a couple weeks ago. Santa is beside himself with worry, and he's talking about calling off Christmas. We have not missed a Christmas ever. And we are not about to now. We need your help, Pudgy.
The elvish woman said in a rushed, worried tone, while Pudgy frowned and started to whimper. Oh no! Pudgy will help! Do you know where she was last? The elf woman was just about to speak when Argente cut her off.
No, Pudgy will not help you. We just got done with an adventure. And who knows if those monsters are going to return.
The ornament floated over towards Argente, whose eyes were burning brightly as she stared at the elvish woman who spoke in return.
I know you care for Pudgy. We all do. But this is serious. Only Pudgy can help us, and he will not be going alone. Xylenia will be going with him. She may look compact, but she can grow much larger and breathe fire. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that. We do not want another Chicago incident.
Apparently, my mother was quite active in the old days with Santa. There is a reason why Santa does not give out coal anymore to the bad children.
The silver fox nodded as she calmed down, but spoke with an annoyed tone.
Well, if Pudgy has a fire-breathing dragon, it might be all right to go. But we must tell COBALT first.
I concur with Argente's request. Pudgy, Mrs. Claus has ornament earrings which allow us to track and communicate with her. The last known location of Mrs. Claus was some place called Savannah, which we believe to be located in Georgia.
Pudgy bounced happily as he spoke. Pudgy knows where Georgia is. Pudgy has a good friend that lives there too. She helped Pudgy on the Civil War adventure. But how can Pudgy track Mrs. Claus if her earrings are not working? The dragoness nodded as she pulled from her pouch a small white hat. She handed it to Pudgy, who immediately recognized his hat from the Christmas Eve present delivery process. Glitter smiled in the ornament as she spoke with an official tone.
Pudgy Hedgehog, by order of Santa Claus, your white hat status has been reactivated. You are now assigned to the security division. When you reach Savannah, you will meet with one of our advanced elf corps soldiers.
Wait a moment. Santa has military forces?
Yes, Argente. In case of emergency, they are activated and sent to help Santa in dangerous spots. In addition to the soldiers, the SIA, Santa Intelligence Agency operatives will be there as well to assist.
Glitter watched through her ornament as Pudgy put the hat upon his head. There was a green stripe on the exterior that changed to red.
The white hat has some power, which will be explained upon arrival at the forward base camp. Please be advised that it is limited and will quickly run out, so use its power sparingly. The power can be refreshed if need be, which Xylenia will show you how to if that becomes necessary. Now, before I forget, there are some other elves that wanted to say hi.
Soon, a stream of excited elves Both male and female waved and said hello to Pudgy. They were from the medical unit, as well as the other white hats that were with Pudgy during the gift delivery operations. Pudgy bounced and greeted them all, and became a bit sad when Glitter's ornament eventually darkened. It began to float back to Xylenia's clawed hand, who carefully placed it back into her belt's pouch. The appearance of the various elves the hedgehog had met, as well as their tidings of joy, made him feel so much better. Argente noticed a slight change in her hedgehog friend's fur when some of the white areas started to darken slightly. Pudgy quickly scampered inside of his home and over to the wall-mounted cellular phone. After turning it on and accessing the text messaging function, the critter started to tap out a message to send to his friend Cobalt. Argente peeked inside through the interior doorway to see the screen light up and the speaker went ding! Pudgy turned to face his silver fox friend as he spoke. Cobalt says he's coming over. The trio of friends then laughed while Xylenia told stories of what had happened at the North Pole. The Dragoness was now in charge of logistics and would help retrieve materials for the toy-making operations. Elves can only lift so much before they have to call in dragon support. Her mother also filled in many gaps in her memories, as well as provided context to past events. They were on good terms now, though occasionally would get on each other's nerves. Such a thing was normal for family, be it human or animal. After about an hour passed, Cobalt appeared in the large room's open doorway. As the humans smiled at Xylenia, all could see that he brought the big blue cooler on the wheels. Pudgy knew what that meant.
Hello, Xylenia. It's so good to see you once again. Hello, Argente. Hello, Pudgy. I brought goodies!
With careful maneuvering by both human and dragon, Cobalt was able to sit down on the banquette seat and hug Xylenia from behind. The dragoness giggled and watched as the man's arms reached around and over to the cooler to open it. Pudgy and Argente joined Cobalt up on the seat and were bouncing excitedly when he began to pass out pieces from a large hoagie that had been cut up. As dinner progressed, the assembled group munched happily and began to explain what had been discussed on the communication call with Glitter the Elf. Cobalt quietly listened to the details explained, as well as Argente's quiet pleas for Pudgy to remain home. The Silver Fox was making good points. However, the human was also keenly aware that if he put his foot down and said no, his little hedgehog friend would become quite insistent on helping and sneak off. It was not long until the large hoagie was finished and the green dragon was rubbing her belly. Cobalt began to speak as he retrieved his phone from his pocket and access the map application.
Okay, Savannah is about 12 hours by car, Pudgy. A commercial flight is 2 hours, so with Xylenia flying, it should be about the same time. On the side note, I've been working on your biplane, but it's not ready for flight yet.
Pudgy looked up at his human friend, while Xylenia had a confused expression as she tried to maneuver around to face her friends. Pudgy asked, "What's wrong with the plane?"
Well, that little engine was never meant to fly like it did. I think the goddess magic also screwed something up inside, so I had to take it apart. Don't worry, I've located parts for an upgrade.
The dragoness craned her head back to look at Cobalt as she spoke.
What? Plane? You mean Pudgy can fly places now?
Cobalt nodded and watched as the dragoness picked up the little hedgehog to hug him tightly again.
See, I am not the only one who thinks this is a bad idea. And worse was the aerial combat part of that story.
As the Silver Fox commented, the dragon's silver eyes locked onto Pudgy, who had to explain about the aerial combat and the machine gun on the plane. Xylenia was beside herself as she spoke.
Pudgy, I leave for almost 11 months, and all of this happens? I should never have left you. I feel terrible now.
Xylenia, it has indeed been rough here, but we got through it all. Please, do not be upset. Say, I know what will make you feel better. Cake. And lots of it.
After all those assembled laughed, the animals moved around so Cobalt could more easily access the cooler. Inside was a large pile of individually wrapped snack cakes. There was a variety of them, with or without icing, and after each had picked their favorite, the man opened the packages and allowed the critters to eat. The only thing left was the marble cake, but soon that was opened and passed out. Cobalt patted the dragon's head gently as he spoke.
Argente makes good points, and while I am leaning in agreement with her, however, we all know Pudgy wants to help. Pudgy, I support your decision to go, as long as Xylenia promises to keep Pudgy safe and bring him back here afterwards.
The dragoness nodded and giggled when she found herself being hugged again by Cobalt, Pudgy, and eventually Argente. As the sugar hit, Pudgy started running around in circles, then began trips to bring in cups of tea to the room. Once everyone was served, the hedgehog nibbled on a piece of marble cake as he listened to Xylenia.
Cobalt, we need to leave tonight. Every day that Mrs. Claus is not at the North Pole is another day that Santa is distracted. Millions of children may not have a Christmas.
I am not against that idea, but let me check something first on my phone. Okay, the weather's going to be in the 80s to 70s for the next week, and lows in the 50s down in Savannah. Okay, that means no cold weather gear is necessary.
Canada is so cold now, so this means a more pleasant trip since I'll be flying south. My mother instructed me on how to stay aloft longer now, so I will be able to fly there without stopping.
Pudgy, go inside your home and prepare your gear.
Pudgy scampered inside of his living quarters and then opened the cabinet to retrieve his backpack and mining helmet, as well as put on the brown vest. Tucking the Hecatian talisman and the blue sapphire into their secure pockets within his vest, he buttoned them securely shut. Back and forth the hedgehog moved, taking out supplies from his various cabinets and packing his bag. Argente padded inside as she ducked under the door jamb and sat looking sad at him.
You're doing it again. Please, be careful.
The hedgehog turned and scooted over to hug his fox friend. Pudgy promises that Pudgy will be careful. Xylenia will be going with Pudgy, and the elves are already there, so they will help too. Pudgy will not be alone this time. The silver fox nodded and hugged her hedgehog friend before backing out of the living area. Pudgy shut the vents on the wood stove and secured the firebox so the remaining log would burn out. The storm barricades were lowered on the windows before being shut and locked. By the time the hedgehog returned to the bedroom, he found it empty, and everyone was standing outside in front of the round bifold door. Upon receiving the text message from Pudgy about Xylenia and Mrs. Claus, Cobalt had smartly brought a variety of supplies in the cooler. The human was busy strapping bags onto the dragon, who was giggling. Cobalt watched as Pudgy started to work the door controls to swing the bifold doors back into their closed position. The light disappeared that had been cast out from the open doorway. The fall twilight was disappearing quickly as the night skies above were clear. Cobalt checked his phone again as he spoke.
I checked the weather again. You should not hit rain until you reach Virginia.
The dragoness nodded, watching the lights inside the hedgehog's home turn off one by one. Shortly thereafter, Pudgy exited through his front door, secured the door, and lowered the storm barricade down. Xylenia picked which food items she wanted to take from the cooler and wiggled her hips when Cobalt put them into the various supply bags. Argente had her front paws on the top edge of the cooler as well, looking and sniffing at the various foods within, securely wrapped in plastic. Pudgy scampered up to Xylenia wearing his white Santa hat, and the mining helmet's light was now clipped to the outside of his pack. Once Pudgy put the white Santa hat on, it wouldn't come off. When Pudgy tried to put the mining helmet on over it, it flew off.
Yes, those hats seem to have a mind of their own sometimes. So, no mining helmet for this adventure. Are you packed up and ready to go, Pudgy?
The hedgehog nodded, but soon found himself being hugged by Argente. Then Cobalt knelt and scooped up the two of them and hugged both Pudgy and Argente as he spoke.
I put a couple $20 bills into Xylenia's bags, just in case you two need money. Please, be careful and return home.
When the human man released both Argente and Pudgy, he watched as his little friend scampered over and climbed up onto Xylenia's back. Taking a few steps back, both the human and Silver Fox allowed room for the green dragon to start to flap her wings. It was not long until Xylenia was starting to hover before turning to take flight into the air. Pudgy waved as he called out, "Bye, Cobalt! Bye, Argente! Pudgy, be back soon!" Cobalt and Argente waved at the departing dragon and hedgehog as they departed. When the dragoness was no longer visible, the human sighed and shook his head as he started to pack the cooler up.
Argente, I brought some things for you too, so let's head to your cottage. Hey, is that light still blinking on the outside of your cottage?
The Silver Fox nodded as she started to cheer up a bit.
Yes, Cobalt. Can you please fix it for me?
The man nodded, stood, and began to follow Argente while he pulled the cooler behind him as the plastic wheels squeaked. Pudgy watched as his friends and his forest home quickly disappeared. The critter rode in a red fabric pouch that was at the center of the dragoness's back and held onto the straps that were tied around her body that secured the supply bags to her hips. The dragoness had returned to her normal size, while she flapped her wings hard to gain altitude. The leather harness magically resized with her body, which made the little hedgehog ponder quietly as they flew higher and higher into the night sky. In a short matter of time, the dragon had reached the upper sides of the wispy clouds floating in the air silently. Xylenia outstretched her wings, and they began to glide on the wind. Lights from a city illuminated the ground below them, with a large football stadium with a painted end zone that had the letters W, V, and U. Pudgy blinked and said, "Pudgy thinks we're over Morgantown. Boy, you're fast now, Xylenia."
My mother taught me a few tricks. Plus, I know where we're going. The SIA gave me a homing crystal, so I can see a navigation light on the horizon.
The hedgehog nodded as Xylenia spoke while trying to get more comfortable for the long flight ahead. The plan was to fly over West Virginia, then North Carolina, then South Carolina to get to Georgia. Savannah was located along the coastline of the Atlantic Ocean. Cobalt mentioned that it was the oldest city in the state. Pudgy wiggled his nose as he asked, "What was Mrs. Claus doing in Savannah, Xylenia?"
She is a doctor and goes to various hospitals and medical places to help. It is entirely possible she took off the earrings because she was busy helping, but it is so close to Christmas that it has caused a huge distraction. Mrs. Claus is responsible for so many daily things that the castle is at a standstill. We have elves sitting around, rooms full of boxes, paperwork not done. The party's not planned, it's chaos, and no one will decide anything. Then when someone does make a decision, it's arguments and fights all day long.
Pudgy nodded as he tied his paws into the straps so he would not fall from his dragon friend's back. Had the little critter known he was going on a trip, he would have slept longer today. It was not long until Pudgy's eyes fluttered shut and he fell fast asleep. Xylenia smiled the whole time and stayed steady as she flew. She was not tired and would rest upon arrival at the SIA Elves camp. It was best to allow her hedgehog friend time to sleep since tomorrow was going to be a busy day. One thing the dragon is always worried about, though, the unknown factors at play. What if something terrible happened to Mrs. Claus? What if the monsters that Pudgy described were still around and would attack the elves? That would complicate things even further, though. They would cross that bridge if it were to become a factor risking the operation. Pudgy awoke as Xylenia was shaking from side to side. The little hedgehog called out with a sleepy voice, "Xylenia, are you all right?"
Good morning, Pudgy. Yes, I'm fine. I just hit a bit of turbulence. Oi, you must have been tired because you slept the entire trip. We are here.
The dragoness spoke while she adjusted her wings to start to descend. Pudgy could see the city of Savannah stretching all around and the Atlantic Ocean in the distance. The smell of salt water was in the air even this far away. There was a big park that his dragon friend was flying towards, lined with trees on all sides and 2 long swaths of green fields flanking it. The furthest part of the park was heavily forested, and the hedgehog held on tight as the dragon started to dive. Taking on a terrific amount of speed, Xylenia quickly skirted the treetops and then began to land on the grassy field. She tilted her hips back and lowered her tail, causing her front to lift, and she landed quickly while galloping to try to slow her forward momentum. The dragoness eventually slowed to a stop while folding her wings back, while the morning light was starting to crest over the horizon as she spoke.
Oh, good. We got here before the sunrise.
Pudgy nodded as he spoke. Yes, Pudgy agrees. People are not used to seeing flying dragons, so that would have been bad. I wonder where the elves are.
They are most likely back in the forest to remain hidden.
Pudgy looked confused as he wiggled his nose while he spoke. Pudgy wonders if Glitter's here.
I'm unsure of that myself, so we'll both find out soon.
The dragoness walked slowly as she was recovering from the long flight. In a short period of time, the two friends reached the woods, with what appeared to be a bandstand of some sort in the distance. Pudgy looked left and right while Xylenia walked and could not see anything out of the ordinary. There was an occasional walking trail or stone-lined path for humans to walk around on, but as his dragon friend stopped to survey the forest as she began to shrink down to her more compact size, Pudgy could see outlines of a small camp of some sort in the distance. "Over there, Xylenia!" the hedgehog said while tugging on the hip badge strap of Xylenia. The dragoness turned her head and spoke.
Good catch, Pudgy. There's the base camp.
As the two friends approached, they could see tents lined up in neat rows. The tents were a digital camouflage style consisting of a pattern of red, black, and white colors. Elves in similar military uniforms were standing around, holding binoculars and rifles shouldered on their backs. Once spotted, there was a flurry of activity as elves about a foot tall of fair-skinned complexion with bright eyes of either blue or silver began to point and muster themselves. When Xylenia reached the perimeter, the guard elf spoke in a clear tone.
Xylenia, you are 1 hour late.
Really? Do you know how long it takes to fly from Nova Scotia to Georgia? Let's pick up Pudgy in Pennsylvania.
Pudgy looked down at the elf soldier from the dragon's back and waved while the elf rolled his eyes and spoke.
All right. The HSSA will see you in the center tent. You may proceed.
As the dragon passed by the checkpoint, a faint shimmer appeared, and soon the camp was bathed in a magical glow. Pudgy felt weird as he called out, "Pudgy doesn't feel so good."
The elves made a magical bubble to shield themselves from the exterior. It will pass, Pudgy.
An elderly elf walked out, leaning on a white wood walking stick. Dressed in a similar camouflage outfit as the other soldiers, his shoulder held medallions and official insignia, which indicated that he was in charge. A long white beard hung close to his belt line, and thick spectacles on his nose. In many ways, he resembled Santa, though he clearly was not. Pudgy was starting to recover and looked down at the elderly elf. "What does HSSA stand for?" The elf looked up at Pudgy as he spoke.
White-haired Pudgy Hedgehog, we finally meet. I have been informed of your assistance during the Vril attack last year. I see my request has been approved, as well as the allocation of Xylenia Dragon. HSSA stands for Head Santa Security Agent. I oversee this operation, and my name is Red. Please dismount. I wish to speak to you properly.
Pudgy let go of the straps, wiggled free of the pouch he had been riding in, and fell from Xylenia onto the ground. The hedgehog was dizzy and struggled to stand. The older elf placed a hand on the hedgehog's shoulder, offering a kind look as he spoke.
It will pass. Just give it time and remain where you are. Let me debrief you on what has happened. Mrs. CLAUS is of utmost importance to our operation, and her safe return is paramount. Our intelligence thus far is that she arrived here in Savannah 2 weeks ago and was in regular contact with us until 4 days prior to today. She has been issued earrings, which allow us to communicate and track her location accordingly. Agent 72, one of our advanced team, was able to locate one of the earrings. It had been left at a local food establishment underneath a table. A chef, male, faint complexion, short brown hair, and full beard of similar color.
HSSA Red pointed to a large screen nearby to the command tent, which soon a picture of the middle-aged man matching the description appeared. The human was wearing a white chef's coat and was standing in a southern-style restaurant.
Okay, Pudgy, I will assign you to one of my field agents. Your orders are to head to the restaurant and scour it for details. You may need to follow the chef to attain more details. We do not suspect foul play, but the human may have additional information.
A map of the local area appeared on the white screen, and Pudgy started to study it while an elf wearing a black outfit, black sunglasses, and a respirator walked over the stand beside him. The soldier saluted the HSSA, who saluted back. Pudgy wiggled his nose as the world stopped spinning, and he stood up while speaking. "Should Pudgy salute also?"
No, that is not necessary, since you are a civilian. And if this works out, I can see a future for you within our operations. Okay, Agent 72, please escort Pudgy Hedgehog to the restaurant and proceed with your mission. Dismissed.
The elf operative saluted, nodded, and motioned for Pudgy to follow. The hedgehog scampered beside the elf until he crossed the magical barrier. The world returned to its normal coloration, and his head immediately began to clear. However, now the elf was wobbly beside him and leaned against a tree. Pudgy say we should wait a little bit and let your head clear, Mr. 72. The elf nodded and dropped to his knees. Pudgy turned to watch Xylenia curl up in an empty spot by the tents and wave at him, and then dropped her head down to quickly fall asleep. The hedgehog nodded as his dragon friend could now rest, and turned back to his elf soldier friend. Is Mr. Elf okay now? The agent nodded, stood, and then started to walk beside the hedgehog as he scampered through the tall grass that jutted around the large trees. It was not long until the two reached the edge of the park. Roads could be seen that led further into downtown Savannah. Pudgy remembered from the map shown that it was going to be a far distance, but he would be all right. The hedgehog was more concerned about his elf friend, who, despite the protective gear, was clearly still wobbly. Pudgy stopped, looked left, looked right, before stepping out on the concrete sidewalk. The little hedgehog scampered along the sidewalk until he reached the crosswalk. The cars were zipping past at a really fast speed, so it would be much safer crossing at the crosswalk. Upon reaching the pole where the button could be pressed to trigger the crosswalk, Pudgy pondered how to push the button. He turned to his companion, but found he was alone. Oh no! Pudgy lost Mr. 72! Pudgy needs to push the button! The hedgehog exclaimed while watching a shimmer pass by him. It ascended the pole, and the button went click. The elf dropped beside him and spoke.
Optical camouflage. I must remain hidden, although I am with you.
The traffic light changed to red, and then the walking symbol glowed across the street. Pudgy started to run because he knew there was only a short time to cross. The counter on the sign counted down, and just as it reached 0, the hedgehog made it to the next sidewalk. Panting, Pudgy stopped a moment to catch his breath. The various cars and trucks started to move once more, while several white delivery trucks passed by honking their horns. Beep beep! The hedgehog turned and started to walk along the sidewalk, looking at the stately Victorian-era buildings and mansions. There was even a big mansion house across the road with a statue of a wild boar out front. The hedgehog commented, Savannah is so busy. This place is not like Pennsylvania at all. After traversing one block, they came to another street, although this one without a crossing signal. So Pudgy looked left and right, took a deep breath, and ran like crazy again. He dodged the tan-colored car as he reached the next curve. The tired hedgehog looked forward and could see another part. Pudgy rubbed his eyes with his paw and settled in for a long trip. The critter marveled at how the city was laid out. It seems the path he was taking was 2 city blocks, then a park, then 3 more city blocks, and then another park. They had entered a shopping district area with tree-lined streets. Where Pennsylvania's trees had lost most of their leaves, here in Georgia, they were still green and full of life. Pudgy leaned against a white stucco wall and looked up at a misspelled store sign that read, Chocolate. Chocolate. That sounds good. As the little hedgehog peeked into the door, he saw a woman tasting a piece of fudge. Looking around, Pudgy could not see the elf nor his shimmering, so perhaps a side trip would be okay. He scampered inside the chocolate store and found neat shelves and glass display cases everywhere. While he could not see the chocolates, Pudgy could smell them. The critter's nose twitched as he watched the smiling woman with long brown hair pulled back and stuffed into a hairnet and wearing a white apron with a company name embroidered on it. It was not long until the woman looked down at the hedgehog with his Santa hat on, sitting on the green tile floor.
Oh my! Who might you be? Are you lost?
The woman who had been tasting the fudge turned and immediately smiled when she caught sight of the hedgehog. It was his friend Beth from Chicago, whom he met on the riverboat adventure back at Cave and Rock.
Pudgy!
The woman knelt, quickly scooped up the hedgehog, and began to hug him. Long, light brown hair cascaded down her front and partially covered him. Pudgy wiggled his nose and then started to bounce happily in her embrace as he called out, Hi, Beth! Pudgy's so glad to see you! The chocolate store worker's eyes went wide when the hedgehog started to talk. The two women giggled as Beth stood and then gently placed Pudgy onto the glass counter. The hedgehog looked into the case and pointed excitedly with his paw. Oh boy, all the chocolates look so good. Miss Lady, why is the sign spelled wrong outside?
It is a French spelling. But I must say, I never thought a talking hedgehog would ever come to the store.
His friend from Chicago was still smiling, nodding, and spoke happily.
Pudgy, I was hoping to see you again, but never thought here in Savannah. What are you doing down here?
The hedgehog pondered a moment and realized he should not tell them about the elves. Pudgy's down here to find someone who is missing. Another Pudgy friend, very worried, asked Pudgy to help find her. The store worker nodded as a concerned look appeared on her face.
Oh my, that's serious. What does she look like?
Pudgy's friend is tall, with faint blue eyes and long blonde hair that's almost graying.
I do not remember seeing anyone like that. I just died into town yesterday, though.
The chocolate store worker spoke as she nodded while Beth rubbed her chin.
Oh my, I remember her. She was in the store about a week ago. She bought 3 dozen truffles and it was a cash sale too. She said she was staying at the Foley House Inn, I believe. It's just over there. Go down the street through Chippewa Square and then it's across the street.
Pudgy bounced happily. Thank you, Miss Chocolate Lady. Pudgy needs to go now. The hedgehog scampered across the case, slid down the side, and bounced down onto the floor. Pudgy waved at his friend Beth. Bye, Beth! His human friend paid for her order, giggling with the store clerk as the two women waved at the hurrying hedgehog as he exited the store. Once outside, Pudgy could see the shimmering field beside a green trash can that was on the sidewalk. Pudgy scampered over and called out, Pudgy found out where Mrs. Claus is! She's at the Foley House Inn. It's over there. The optically camouflaged elf immediately rushed forward and took off at a tremendous rate of speed to reach the park in seconds. Pudgy rushed to try and keep up and was falling quickly behind when suddenly he was scooped up by his human friend Beth. She smiled down at the hedgehog in her left hand and the bag of chocolates in her right.
Pudgy, you should not have scampered off like that. I'll help you get over there.
Pudgy looked up and bounced, watching as the ground quickly sped by as his human friend was walking. The woman giggled as she crossed the street to reach Chippewa Square. It was another small park with walking trails. The park's claim to fame was it was where the bench was located in a famous movie by some guy named Tom. That movie also featured chocolates, which was appropriate as Beth was holding a bag of chocolates. As the two friends passed by a white stone monument of a bronze statue of a uniformed soldier, the outlines of the surrounding buildings peeked through the trees. The side of an exceptionally large church could be seen facing the park, as well as several stately brick buildings surrounding the park. Passing by a flowering bush with purple flowers, Beth quickly reached the crosswalk. There was an orange brick building with black shutters in the distance. A sign could be seen that read Foley, as well as a round covered awning over the front door. Pudgy looked up at his friend and wiggled his nose as he spoke. Pudgy's very glad to see you, Beth. The woman smiled when the signal flashed across the street. She started to walk while speaking.
Well, Pudgy, I moved down here to be with my boyfriend. He surprised me with a Christmas present to Savannah, although he must work a day or two first. I had a need for chocolate, and that store seemed nice. I was surprised and awfully glad to see you scamper inside the store. Say, did you ever make it to New Orleans?
The hedgehog bounced in her hand and then watched as she reached the opposite sidewalk. Turning to the left, they started to head towards the inn. The little hedgehog confirmed that he did reach New Orleans, but stopped short of the Grand Tail when the two friends reached the front door. There was a frosted glass front, and the requisite details about the inn painted on the glass in an Art Deco style. Opening the door, Beth walked into a grand entranceway. There were columns of dark-stained mahogany, a red brick fireplace with a crackling fire, a huge mirror hung over the fireplace, which Beth smiled when she saw Pudgy and her in the mirror. The walls were covered with beige, striped wallpaper and set up in a formal style. Somewhere, Christmas music was playing from cleverly designed speakers hidden away in pots of flowers that flanked the room. The front desk of the inn was located nearby with an older woman smiling at the new visitors.
Hello! Welcome to the Foley House Inn.
The front desk clerk was wearing a black and burgundy uniform and had her silver hair pulled up into a bun. Beth walked over and set Pudgy down on the brown wood counter. The little hedgehog waved at the clerk and spoke. "Hello, Miss Lady. Can you help Pudgy, please?" The clerk blinked her brown eyes in disbelief and then adjusted the glasses on the tip of her nose.
Did you just talk?
Pudgy nodded and bounced happily, which drew more looks as the astonished woman gingerly touched the top of his head with a quivering pointer finger. When the clerk confirmed the hedgehog was in fact real and sitting there, she nodded as she spoke.
Well, I'll try. Pudgy, is it?
The hedgehog nodded as Beth stood at the counter and giggled behind him. "Pudgy's friend is missing and she might be here. She's tall, with fair skin, and long blonde hair that's turning silver. Her name is Alexandra," the hedgehog stated in a clear tone, while the clerk nodded as she began to type upon the keyboard of the computer terminal.
Why, yes, I can look at our bookings, as well as our security for it. But I must ask, who told you she is missing? Normally, missing persons cases are handled by the police, not hedgehogs.
The clerk listened as the critter spoke, while noticing the white Santa hat on his head and a tiny backpack on his back. "Pudgy is friends with Alexandra's husband, who is worried about her. He could not come, so he sent Pudgy down here to see what's going on. If Alexandra is okay, Pudgy will tell him, and Pudgy go home."
Oh, so the husband is checking up on her, I see. He sent you to do his dirty work while he's blameless from afar.
The two women laughed as the keyboard clicked while it was typed upon. Soon a beep sound could be heard, and the female clerk spoke while nodding.
Yes, she is booked here for 2 weeks. Alexandra CLAUS. She is in the Suffolk room, 205 on the 2nd floor. Would you like me to call the room?
Pudgy nodded and bounced happily while he spoke. "Yes, please." The clerk smiled as she picked up an antique rotary phone and then started to dial the room. Beth, in the meantime, opened her bag and started to nibble on a chocolate turtle that she had bought. It was not actually a turtle. The wickedly sweet treat was made with pecans, caramel, and chocolate formed in the shape of a turtle.
Hello? This is the front desk. There are 2 visitors here asking about you. Well, a woman with long brown hair and a talking hedgehog wearing a Santa hat. Yes, I see. Thank you. Pudgy, Alexandra is here and would like for you to come upstairs. To get to room 205, please go down that hallway. Take the stairs to floor 2, make a left, and follow the signs.
The clerk said while she hung up the phone with a smile on her lips. Pudgy was scooped back up by his human friend. Both smiled, and the hedgehog waved. The woman smiled as she watched the two head down the hallway she had directed them to. When they disappeared from view, she rubbed her temples as the clerk thought about what else might show up today. Talking hedgehogs was strange enough, that is, until the astonished woman watched as the front door opened all by itself, several shimmering clouds darted along the floor, and then disappeared. The exasperated woman took off her glasses and said,
"Okay, my blood sugar is falling. I need something to eat."
The clerk locked her station as she walked off the employee break room, trying to clear her mind. Meanwhile, Beth ascended the stairs and followed the directions provided by the clerk to reach the 2nd floor. The inn was a strict southern formal style of decoration. Green velvet carpets ran the length of the hallways, small white tables adorned with baskets of flowers, various portraits hung on the wall, with little golden lighted placards of the various southern dignitaries that had stayed within the inn. Room numbers continued to descend, with even numbers on the left and odd numbers on the right. It was not long until the two friends reached the correct room. Beth stopped at the thick white wooden door with a peephole in the middle. Using the back of her hand, the woman knocked a couple times. Knock, knock, knock. Movement could be heard within the room, and soon the peephole went from light to dark, then light once more. The door lock clicked, and the door began to swing inwards. Standing behind the door was a tall woman, just as Pudgy described. She was wearing a red dress with white lace that came to her knees. Her soft blue eyes were almost piercing, as she examined her visitors in the hallway. Pudgy waved and bounced excitedly. "Hi, Alexandra! Pudgy came to save you!" The two women started to laugh.
Please, come in, Pudgy and Beth.
Alexandra stepped aside, allowing Beth to enter the room. Pudgy's human friend pondered as to how this strange woman knew what her name was. She had not provided it to the clerk when they spoke earlier. The door swung shut, and it clicked as it settled into place as Mrs. CLAUS shut the door. The room had red walls with a huge white marble fireplace. There was an oil painting of children playing with toys in front of the fire, while golden mirrors flanked each side. A huge bed, though not made, had white heavy blankets off to the side. Alexandra walked beside the surprised woman, giving her questioning glances. She reached out to take Pudgy from Beth's hands and looked at him with a soft expression.
Let me guess. The elf said I was missing. I am fine, Pudgy. I was just busy and having a good time.
Pudgy started to hug her, and the kind woman hugged gently back. Beth was staring in disbelief as she spoke.
Wait a moment. Did you say elves?
Alexandra nodded and motioned her to sit into a nearby stuffed pale leather Victorian chair. While Beth moved over to sit, she watched Alexandra take a seat on the edge of the bed.
Yes, I did, Beth. And I am sure you were wondering how I know your name. Well, my husband has a list of good and bad children, and your name was always on the good list.
Wait, why am I on a list? Wait, a list of good and bad children? Are you? You can't be.
Pudgy looked up at Beth as he spoke. "Beth, this is Mrs. CLAUS. Remember when Pudgy said he helped Santa last year?" Beth blinked in sheer disbelief as she looked at Alexandra, then rubbed her temples while covering her eyes as she processed what was just revealed to her. Mrs. CLAUS crossed her long legs, sat Pudgy on her bare knee, and started to look at her little friend. The hedgehog looked older, but he had unnatural white spots throughout his fur. His quills were starting to turn silver, which drew an immediate concerning look.
Pudgy, what have you been up to? Tell me everything.
The hedgehog began to tell his grand tale of everything that had happened since he returned from the North Pole. As his story progressed, both Alexandra and Beth stared in disbelief at the myriad of adventures. The hedgehog had gone to the moon, searched for, fought a demon with Civil War ghosts, a steamboat adventure to New Orleans to fight a demon and rescue the Duke, a Revolutionary War adventure with yet another demon, then a World War I submarine adventure to fight that demon's shadowy forces, and finally the rescue mission to free Angeliki from the clutches of the demon of Mount Rainier. During the tale, Alexandra had moved to a chair to sit and was looking very concerned. The older woman covered her chest with her left hand, while Beth clearly became upset. Once Pudgy was done telling his grand tale, Beth jumped up from her chair, scooped up the hedgehog into her hands as she cried while hugging Pudgy tightly.
Pudgy, I'm so glad you're safe. Please, do not go on any more adventures. I'm unsure if you're gonna survive another one.
Alexandra nodded while she spoke.
I'm inclined to agree with Beth, Pudgy.
A small voice by the door rang out.
I had no idea.
As the two women looked up, a shimmering light revealed slowly a figure dressed in red and black camouflage. The figure was about twice the height of Pudgy. Beth's eyes went wide as she pointed.
What is that?
Breathe. Slowly. Don't hyperventilate, Beth. Agent, I see you enlisted Pudgy Hedgehog for your search.
The elf approached, saluted her, and spoke.
Yes, ma'am. The SIA have the area under surveillance, and your room is now properly secured. I'm Agent 72.
Alexandra giggled as she set the hedgehog on the bed beside her while she spoke.
Agent, I regret to inform you that I will not be returning just yet. I am still needed here.
The agent stood silently, and Pudgy waved at Mrs. CLAUS to get her attention. As the older woman turned, the critter called out, "Pudgy wants to help Mrs. CLAUS." Beth had recovered from her hyperventilating and looked at the elf with wide eyes full of wonder-filled thoughts. His long ears jutted out from a military-style hat dotted with red and black checkers. Mrs. Claus was sitting beside her in a chair, elves dressed in military outfits, her hedgehog friend in Savannah. What else was coming? Alexandra spoke as she looked over at Beth.
My husband, Santa Claus, allows me to exit the North Pole and the surrounding lands once a year. Usually, it occurs during the summer. Although this year, due to a variety of factors, I was delayed until the fall. There is a children's hospital nearby to the inn that I have been assisting at. I need to let them know I will be leaving soon, however.
Pudgy nodded and listened intently. Beth nodded as she listened and muttered something under her breath in disbelief. The elvish agent nodded, touched his right ear, resulting in a clicking sound with a hiss of an audible radio signal. After a couple moments of quiet communication, the elf looked up at Mrs. Claus once more as he spoke.
Ma'am, the HSSA is indicating that we need to leave immediately. Santa is...
I told you I am not leaving just yet, Agent.
The sharpness of Mrs. Claus's response snapped everyone's attention back to focus, while Pudgy scampered to hide under a pillow. The critter peeked out after a couple of moments. When Alexandra saw him timidly looking out, the woman calmed herself and giggled again. Beth turned to her and spoke quietly.
Mrs. Claus, may I ask a question?
Yes, what is it, my dear?
Beth swallowed a couple of times, and before she could even speak, the older woman nodded.
I see. You're confused about how Santa, the elves, and I exist. I get that question a lot, actually.
Pudgy wiggled his nose and watched his friend Beth squirm a bit in her seat before she nodded and responded.
It's almost as if you can read my mind. Wait, is that how Santa knows if someone's naughty?
Well, I can see your expression. And I know this has been a lot to take in, so it makes sense that would be your first question. The truth is...
The eyes of Beth grew very tired, and suddenly she fell asleep in her chair. Pudgy sniffed the air, and there was a faint smell of cinnamon wafting. Agent 72 materialized from behind Beth's head and had an empty tube of a shimmering gas next to her left cheek. Pudgy frowned and pointed, while Mrs. Claus spoke and nodded.
I was wondering when you were going to do that. Do not worry, Pudgy. It's a mild sedative. The elves will take your friend Beth back to her hotel in the city. When she wakes in a couple of hours, she will remember that she bought chocolates and walked back to the hotel where she is staying. She will not remember any of this, nor meeting you today.
The hedgehog frowned as he whimpered. Did you really need to do that? Beth is Pudgy's friend, and she helped Pudgy get here to the inn. The elf agent motioned with his left hand towards Mrs. Claus.
Pudgy, we need to keep a low profile while Mrs. Claus remains here. The existence of Santa and his operation must remain a source of joy and wonder, but ultimately a fantasy. If humans were to know that we were real, there would be severe complications.
While I disapprove of their methods, I can see the logic in their actions of the elvish security forces. I would give you an example. If Santa were to be proven real, it would disrupt this world. Toy companies, for instance, employ thousands of workers, who in turn support millions of families. If children knew Santa were real, they would wait for his toy and would not want a store-bought toy. There would be worldwide economic pain as the companies closed and people were thrown out of work.
Pudgy understands. On the way here, Pudgy spoke to the candy lady and the front desk lady. Pudgy didn't tell them who you were, only that you were a Pudgy friend. And her husband was worried that she was missing. Please, don't gas them too! The hedgehog whimpered as he made hopeful eyes at her. Alexandra nodded.
I promise they will be fine, Pudgy. Now, let me assist our agent friend here with Beth. You certainly have grown more beautiful as you have aged, my dear. I'm sure your boyfriend's reason for bringing you here will become clearer later this week.
The older woman stood and spoke while she walked over to Beth to run her hand along her face. Alexandra reached to her left ear to touch a crystal ornament earring. It started to glow and then burst into snowflake sparkles. Beth disappeared from the chair. The hedgehog waved when she turned around and spoke. Mrs. Claus, Pudgy was told about your earrings. Did you teleport Beth back to her hotel room? Mrs. Claus nodded as she sat back into the overstuffed chair while she crossed her long legs. Pudgy started to see something, but immediately closed his eyes before he got into trouble. That drew a loud laughter from the woman. By the time Pudgy opened his eyes, the critter could see that the Elvis agent was now sitting beside him. Pudgy rubbed his chin and pointed at her right ear as he called over. The elves at the camp said they found your other earring at a restaurant. Boy, Pudgy hopes Mr. Chef is okay. Mrs. Claus blinked as she looked at the agent.
72? What does Pudgy mean?
When we arrived to begin our search, our initial tracking of your humming signal led us to a restaurant. We have obtained the chef and retrieved your earring. Before we located you here at this establishment, a male human was undergoing intensive questioning. We should release him accordingly. I need to communicate to my superiors.
Pudgy turned to the elf, watching the agent radio over his headset. After several moments of quiet speaking, the elf nodded and spoke once more.
The person of interest has already been released, and our scouts followed him at a safe distance to an establishment along the riverfront. It is a place called the Boar's Head Tavern.
The exasperated woman sighed as she rubbed her temples and spoke.
Pudgy, as you can see, this is why I leave the North Pole occasionally. Every time I experience a new place, the SIA or the Elvish military forces arrive. And do not get me started on what happened in Birmingham.
Ma'am, we have agreed not to discuss that matter. It was an honest mistake.
Pudgy looked confused as he rubbed his belly, which was now grumbling. The woman smiled and nodded.
I too am hungry, Pudgy. How about we head to that tavern? I've eaten there several times since coming here. I must get ready for the excursion, though.
As she stood up, Pudgy covered his eyes with his paws. The elf covered his eyes as well, which drew a big laugh from Alexandra. In a little less than an hour, the older woman was ready, and while she had the same vibrant dress on, she had a variety of stockings and accessories that women require to be able to go out in public. As Mrs. Claus tossed a red and silver purse strap over her shoulder, she reached down to gently scoop up Pudgy from the bed. The elf agent went invisible once more, and in a quick movement, they exited the room. Pudgy was looking forward to going to dinner with Mrs. Claus, and stayed still while she was carrying him. The woman descended the staircase and followed the hallway to the main lobby. The front desk clerk waved at Pudgy, who waved back, with Mrs. Claus smiling in return as well. Upon exiting the inn, Alexandra turned and began to walk down the sidewalk. The route to the tavern was direct and not a far distance to walk by foot. The woman had followed the path several times, and it took about 15 minutes to reach the destination. The little hedgehog was so soft in her hands, which made her smile. As the two friends passed by an exceptionally large stone church, the clock tower on the roof started to chime 3 times.
3 o'clock. That means those fritters should still be available. I have not had a bad thing yet.
Pudgy excitedly looked around at the unfolding scenery as they passed through the city. The trip to the tavern was much farther than Pudgy expected, although with Mrs. Claus walking, it went by quick. There were many looks by the various pedestrians along the route at the platinum blonde-haired older woman walking with a hedgehog in her hands. Pudgy waved at the people, who waved back, drawing comical looks and giggles from the various female passerby. Reaching the aptly named River Street, Pudgy could see boats floating by in the Savannah River. There was a huge structure across the river, but the hedgehog did not get a good look at it as his friend turned to the left quickly. As women can attest, wearing high heels and walking is tricky to say the least. However, when you add historically accurate cobblestone road surfaces, it makes things quite challenging. This was the heart of the historical district. Mrs. Claus carefully walked until she reached a much smoother spot of brick pavers that formed the sidewalk. The buildings were made with a nondescript beige brick that many had applied stucco over the river-facing fronts to try to maintain the brick from the salty sea air. There were iron windows, stained from years of storm, that ran along the exteriors in neat rows. The hedgehog wondered in wide-eyed amazement, noting these buildings had been standing here far longer than Pudgy or even Cobalt had been alive. All manner of yummy smells wafted through the air. Fresh seafood was cooking somewhere, and many sweet smells of cornbread coming from a bakery they were passing. The road started to descend once more, which required the woman to walk carefully on the cobblestones. With expert maneuvers, the two friends arrived in front of an incredibly old-looking building. There were a set of aluminum poles that held a round covered awning that was striped green and white. Pudgy read out loud, "Boar's Head Tavern. Established 1959.
Yes, I remember that year. There were many cowboy toys requested.
Pudgy nodded and looked forward at the two large green wooden doors that had been opened and flanked the sides of the entrance. There was a standing menu board also painted a dark green that passed by quickly. The little hedgehog looked around quickly as he was being carried inside, not wanting to miss anything. The interior of the restaurant was full of tables, and dark green painted wood paneling was everywhere. Dark brown stained oak beams ran the length of the room in the exposed ceiling. There was an occasional ceiling fan going, though since it was almost winter, they did not need to be going full speed. Alexandra smiled when she reached the hostess station, and a tanned young girl with black hair tied back into a ponytail looked up.
Oh, hello, Alexandra. It's good to see you again. And who might this be?
Pudgy looked up at the young girl wearing an awfully tight pair of blue jeans and a green t-shirt with a boar's head on it. My name's Pudgy. Hello, miss. When the hedgehog introduced himself, it drew a look of shock from her, and then a soft smile from the astonished girl. The restaurant had only a few patrons inside at this time and would be much busier later, so they could pick anywhere to sit. Alexandra headed over to a table for two people and sat Pudgy down on the placemat opposite of hers. The little hedgehog immediately took off his backpack and started to fumble around inside of it. This drew a look of curiosity from Mrs. Claus, who smiled and spoke.
What are you doing, Pudgy?
The hedgehog pulled out a rolled green piece of paper and unfurled it. It was a $20 bill. Cobalt gave Pudgy money in case Pudgy needs it. Will this be enough for dinner? The woman smiled and patted his head.
Yes, I think that should be fine, little one. Although, if it's not, I have money too.
The same waitress came back, returning with a glass of water and a shot glass full of water, and spoke.
Welcome to the Boar's Head Tavern. I'm Emily, and I will be taking care of you. Today's drink specials are margaritas, as well as the Kringle Blaster.
Pudgy looked up at the waitress. Pudgy, stick with water. Cobalt says no adult juice for hedgehogs. The two women started to laugh, while Alexandra covered her eyes and spoke after recovering.
What is the Kringle Blaster?
It is vodka, gingerbread cream, and decaf coffee.
Oh yes, I want one of those.
Menus were placed upon the table, and Pudgy started to look over the huge human-sized menu in front of him. At the same time, the hedgehog could see faint shimmering light moving around the tavern. No doubt Agent 72 was here, as well as several other supporting elves. The waitress returned with a Santa mug topped with whipped cream and red crystallized sugar. The drink was huge, and while he watched Alexandra take a sip from the drink, Pudgy watched her face start to gain more of a red color.
This is so good. And strong, too. I can really taste the Kringle.
News of the hedgehog and the woman had reached the back of the restaurant, which drew the occasional peeking glances from the kitchen staff. This drew a sharp rebuke from a man dressed in a white chef coat and a white hat. It took every bit of persuasive cajoling to get the staff back on track. The chef, yawning from a sudden bout of unexplained sleepiness, returned his focus upon a large skillet. The man spooned clarified butter over vegetables. The staff were all abuzz of what was going on, making comments and wondering about what the talking hedgehog would order. While the older man wanted to join in on the fun, he had to finish this order of shrimp scampi. After he plated the order and wiped an errant splash of oil off the edge of the plate, turned and placed it on the service window. The waitress smiled and took the order quickly to its intended destination. The curiosity was getting the better of him, so the man walked around the line and stuck his head out to investigate the dining room. Just as the other staff explained, there was a stunningly beautiful older woman in a red sundress sitting at the table. Opposite of her, sitting on the table, was a hedgehog wearing a white Santa hat. Having satisfied his curiosity, the chef returned to his kitchen and began to cook the next order. The waitress returned and smiled as the hedgehog was bouncing on the table, pointing at the menu. Pudgy, wanna get the bread pudding? Mrs. Claus gave Pudgy a look.
No, Pudgy, we are not going straight to dessert. I want you to have a proper meal. Emily, can you please ask your chef to make something hedgehog-sized and appropriate? I would like to order the seafood sampler.
Emily nodded as she wrote down the order on a small notepad, turned, and headed towards the kitchen. As the waitress entered the order into the point-of-sale system, the head chef cheered because finally, Someone ordered the meal that he could flex his culinary skills upon. Now, how to make it hedgehog-sized. In the dining room, Pudgy was sipping from his shot glass of water, while Alexandra was giggling. The Kringle Blaster drink was far stronger the further she got into the Santa mug. The older woman's pale, soft blue eyes were watching Pudgy, as well as scanning around the tavern. Pudgy rubbed his eyes as he looked towards the entrance of the dining room. A familiar woman with long brown hair and glasses entered the room along with a tall, tanned man with a neatly cut beard. The couple were led by their waitress over to a set of tables opposite the room from theirs. Pudgy soon began to play with a candle centerpiece on the table. It was battery-powered and had the drink specials on it. The critter was having fun making the light go on and off and on and off and on and off, which drew the attention of the couple as they sat down. A huge smile could be seen on the woman's face as she spotted the little hedgehog with the Santa hat on the table and called over.
Pudgy, is that you?
The hedgehog turned and started a wave while bouncing excitedly. Hi, Heather! Yes, it's Pudgy! The boyfriend blinked in astonishment as he said,
Heather, do you know that hedgehog?
Alexandra smiled and waved while watching the little critter's friend giggle as she turned to face their table.
Pudgy, I'm so glad to see you. Wait, why are you in Georgia again?
The hedgehog bounced happily as he called over. Pudgy had to find a missing lady. Good news! Pudgy found the lady, and her name's Alexandra. Heather motioned with her right hand towards her male companion.
I'm glad you found her, Pudgy. Oh, Pudgy, let me introduce my boyfriend. This is Jack. I met him after our adventure.
The confused man smiled and waved while watching Pudgy wave back at him. Heather returned her focus back to her date, and the waitress stopped by to take their drink orders. It was not long until Emily arrived at their table with a big oval-shaped plate of bubbling foods. There was shrimp scampi, boiled clams with some sort of buttery white sauce, rice pilaf, and a colorful arrangement of vegetables on a Christmas-themed oval plate. Emily then placed a tiny plate in front of the hedgehog, watching him sniff and bounce excitedly. The chef had to put his thinking hat on, so there was a plate of cheese grits, tiny vegetables cut and arranged around the plate. The chef had cut the asparagus spears to fit the plate. After Alexandra said grace, which was a short verse, the two friends started to eat. Pudgy really enjoyed his meal, and it was just the right size for a hedgehog. His female friend was munching away happily and watching the tavern start to fill up with patrons. Pudgy occasionally watched Heather and her boyfriend laugh while holding hands. The little hedgehog hoped Beth was all right wherever she was.
Beth is fine, Pudgy. She's with her boyfriend now, I believe.
Pudgy nodded as he continued to eat while looking around the tavern. There were stacked stone walls along two sides of the dining room with placards from previous businesses that had existed within the location. A sign about a prior tavern before this one opened, and several Prohibition-era signs mentioning where the bakery was located hung from the beams. The figures were all winking for some reason, which the hedgehog did not get. Pudgy finished his meal about the same time as Mrs. Claus, and when he looked up at her, she smiled again.
Pudgy, I don't know about you, but I'm full.
The hedgehog nodded as he rubbed his belly. Pudgy's full, too. We should skip dessert. Alexandra nodded and watched Emily walk over to their table. The bill was reasonable, and Pudgy's $20 bill was enough to cover the meal, but not the tip. Emily was surprised that the hedgehog was paying but accepted the cash. Alexandra handed Emily a couple of bills from her purse for the tip, which drew a big smile from the waitress.
Thank you so much, Alexandra and Pudgy. This means a lot.
Pudgy watched as the excited woman ran off to the cashier's station. The platinum blonde-haired woman had given her more than a waitress would normally receive as a tip. Alexandra stood up and slung her purse over her shoulder and gently scooped up Pudgy into her hands.
All right, Pudgy, it's time for us to go. I have a busy day tomorrow. Heather, Jack, it was a pleasure to meet you.
With the hedgehog waving at Heather, they began to exit the tavern. Heather waved back from her table.
Bye, Pudgy. You be safe, please.
Heather, do you know any other talking animals?
The happy couple laughed and then sipped from their Christmas tree mugs. The older woman soon disappeared from the tavern with a faint shimmering light following her. Jack rubbed his eyes, leaned in towards Heather, and kissed her gently on the cheek. She giggled and then resumed looking at her date with love-filled eyes. When they exited the tavern, Pudgy could see more locals and tourists starting to pass by them on the nearby streets. The sun was setting just as quickly here as it did back home, so he could understand why they were leaving now. After carefully navigating the cobblestone streets, Mrs. Claus smiled when she returned to the level paved concrete sidewalks. The heels were a poor choice, but she looked good in them, so it was worth the difficulty walking. Back home, Alexandra did not have anywhere she could wear the shoes to. As the woman mused on thoughts of home, Pudgy started to whittle in her hands. Looking down, Alexandra saw the hedgehog pointing to a park as they were passing by. "Look, Alexandra, it's Beth! Hey, why's the man kneeling in front of her with a little box?" Mrs. Claus's face softened, and her lips pulled into a smile as she spoke.
Oh, I see. He is proposing to her. Pudgy, we should leave Beth and her fiancé alone. This is a special night.
Pudgy whittled his nose and nodded, while Alexandra turned to look again to see the two lovers embracing. Thoughts drifted to when Mr. Claus proposed to her all those years ago. It had gone by in a blink of an eye, but she did not regret one moment of marriage. It was not long until the two friends reached the crosswalk with its large red signal illuminated to indicate to not cross the street. Pudgy watched as he was moved in front of a large button labeled "Press to Cross." Pudgy was allowed to push the button, and then bounced happily, drawing a giggle from his human friend. The traffic eventually stopped, and the signal turned to white, which indicated it was safe to walk. There was a loud beep sound to notify all it was safe to cross the street. Alexandra reached the other side quickly as she walked. Both friends could see faint shimmering all around her, forming a barrier.
I understand your intentions, but can you please give me a bit of space?
Mrs. Claus said in an annoyed tone, as the gathering camouflaged elves were starting to prevent her from walking. Eventually, she could walk no further, resulting in her voice going sharp once more.
Enough of this. I told you. I have one more day, and then I will be returning. That's it. I'm not telling you this again.
Agent 72 rematerialized in front of her and spoke.
Mrs. Claus, you do not understand. We are under orders to return you to the North Pole. Santa is beside himself with worry, and he is not able to focus on the task at hand.
Pudgy looked up at Alexandra, whose soft eyes were starting to burn bright blue. Realizing she was getting very angry, Pudgy whimpered and started to roll into a ball. The hidden elves looked at each other, and then Agent 72 swallowed hard as he responded.
Mrs. Claus, if it were up to us, we would.
I will not be going back tonight. Tell your superiors that I am heading back to my hotel. Good night to you all.
The enraged woman stepped over the elf and scowled as she walked at a brisk pace. Pudgy stayed tightly rolled into his protective ball shape and didn't peek out at his surroundings until Mrs. Claus had returned to the inn and entered the lobby. The HSSA elf agent Red was sitting in an overstuffed floral chair, while the front desk clerk was slumped over in a nearby chair fast asleep. The older elf looked up and waved.
Good evening, Mrs. Claus and Pudgy Hedgehog. I trust that your dinner was pleasant.
Pudgy peeked out to see the superior elf agent and up at Alexandra's face. The woman was clearly mad and was rolling her eyes as she spoke.
Red, as I told the others, I am not going back yet.
The older elf nodded and adjusted his uniform, producing a small white pipe. As he lit the tobacco within, the elf took a draw from his pipe and spoke softly.
You are aware of why our presence has been summoned here. When you went radio silent and ceased all communications, Santa feared the worst. When our advanced forces found your earring beneath a table, we too feared something untoward had occurred. As you can see, we have located it. You do not understand the severity of the situation. Santa wanted to send the entire USMC here to tear the city apart to find you. Thankfully, I was able to talk sense into him.
There was a crystal ornament earring on the chair beside Red. The little hedgehog remembered. The USMC stood for United Santa Military Cadre, which was the military arm of the elf operations. The exasperated woman nodded as she retorted,
My loving husband worries too much. I am fine and will return home in one day. I have not yet wrapped up my affairs here in the city.
Alexandra leaned over to reach out and take her lost earring from the chair in her right hand. Red spoke once more as he watched her with questioning silver eyes.
Your affairs? Perhaps with that chef that we interrogated. Do I need to report your activities to Santa?
Are you actually threatening to blackmail me? To return home?
The elf smirked as he took a draw from his pipe, and Mrs. Claus's voice echoed loudly in the lobby. Then an uncomfortable silence spread throughout the room. Then Red spoke once more.
Whatever gave you that idea, my dear Mrs. Claus? I am merely thankful to have found you safe, and hear that your vacation has gone well. If you'll excuse me, I will return to our base now and inform command of the status of the situation. Pudgy Hedgehog, please attend to Mrs. Claus and help her pack. She will be leaving in the morning.
The elf hopped from the chair and then strolled past before disappearing once more into a faint shimmer. The front door opened and then closed as the head elf departed. Alexandra noticed the inn was full of faint shimmers everywhere. The elves had taken over the inn, turning it into a prison. The angry woman realized that they were not going to take no for an answer. Mrs. Claus was beyond angry and stormed down the hall, up the stairs, down the corridor to reach her room once more. Pudgy shifted into her right hand that clasped the missing earring as she retrieved the room key from within her purse with her left hand. Placing the key into the lock, she unlocked the door and entered. Shutting the door quick, a loud thump occurred as an elf smacked into the door as he tried to gain entry within. After securing the door's safety latch and deadbolt, the woman tossed the purse and Pudgy onto the bed. Pudgy, still rolled in his protective ball shape, rolled across the bed and landed by a pillow. His quills were sticking out in all directions, as well as his little backpack. Pudgy could hear movements, and a lot of loud, angry words were being spoken in a foreign language. When the little hedgehog was scared or angry, he would roll into a ball shape, which resulted in his quills sticking out in all directions. Although, given his current condition, this allowed the angry woman to clearly see the extent of the unnatural gray and white splotches throughout his body. The room became quiet, and the critter could feel her fingers gently petting him. After a time had passed, Pudgy unfurled his body and looked up at Mrs. Claus. Her face had returned to a look of concern, and her blue eyes had stopped glowing as brightly.
I am sorry, Pudgy. I did not mean to frighten you. Pudgy, this is not good. You are aging at an accelerated rate. You should not be like this for many more years. In your tale, told before we went to dinner, you stated that you rescued the daughter of the goddess Hecate from a mountain in Washington State. This talisman you have been given, it appears to be the cause of these changes within your body. Pudgy, you must be incredibly careful. I am sure COBALT would be sad if you did not come back from your adventures.
The hedgehog nodded as he watched Alexandra put on her lost earring into her left earlobe. The earrings resembled ornaments that one would hang upon a tree and soon began to glow. A familiar voice started to echo throughout the room.
Ho, ho! Alexandra, are you all right? Where have you been? I was so worried.
Yes, husband, I am all right. I'm not pleased, though.
Pudgy knew this was a private conversation, so he scampered under a pillow. The sounds were muffled, and after a period of low murmurs, Mrs. Claus raised her voice once more. It was half in English, half in naughty words that COBALT told Pudgy never to say. When the shouting stopped, Pudgy peeked out from under the pillow, and Mrs. Claus had begun to remove her dress. The little hedgehog shot back under the pillow before he would get in trouble, as the woman remarked,
Pudgy, stay under the pillow. I am taking a bath.
The hedgehog was starting to wonder if it was safer back at camp. Xylenia was probably rested by now, so his dragon friend could get him home if he asked her nicely. But the little critter found himself becoming sleepy in the nice, soft, warm bed. Soon the hedgehog had fallen asleep, and thoughts of the Thanksgiving party floated in his dreams. Time passed, and Pudgy woke up when the bed started to move. The pillow he had been hiding under was moved, and the little hedgehog wiggled his nose as he was revealed. Alexandra was now laying in bed with the covers pulled up, looking defeated and still a bit angry.
Well, Pudgy, it appears that I will be returning tomorrow to the North Pole. I'm not pleased, but I cannot resist this any longer. The children will be so sad, though.
Pudgy looked over at Mrs. Claus. What children? The tired woman closed her eyes and sighed.
I've been volunteering at a hospital nearby here, working as a nurse, trying to bring a bit of Christmas to the children's wing. I had one more day and was going to set up a party for the children. They were looking so forward to it.
Pudgy nodded as he yawned and sleepily spoke. That sounds like a wonderful thing to do. What did Santa say? Her pale blue eyes opened and focused on the hedgehog.
He told me to come home. Work is piled up. The whole castle is starting to fall apart without me. I need to return.
Alexandra sounded sad as she spoke, but soon found Pudgy climbing onto her pillow next to her face. The little critter was now eye level with her and had a determined look as he spoke. Pudgy will go to the hospital and have party for the children. The determined hedgehog's look made the woman smile, and she reached over to gently pet the hedgehog.
That makes me so happy to hear you say that. Santa suggested that you may be able to help with my conundrum. Tomorrow, I will wake you up and fill you in with the details. For now, let us go to sleep, Pudgy.
Alexandra spoke with a tired smile. Pudgy soon fell asleep and would have slept the rest of the night peacefully until he woke up to someone running power tools. It sounded like a buzzsaw, but when the hedgehog turned around, the noise was coming out of Alexandra's nose. She was snoring loudly, which is something Cobalt did occasionally when he slept. Realizing things were safe, the critter scampered under the pillow to resume his slumber. The rest of the night was quiet, save for the occasional snoring flare-out by Mrs. Claus. In the morning, Pudgy woke and climbed from the bed. After attending to some business, the critter checked his pack and Santa hat. Mrs. Claus was readying herself for her return trip and emerged from the bathroom in her familiar red velvet with white accent outfit. The woman was dressed in a proper North Pole attire, and her bag was packed with her belongings. Pudgy turned and looked up at her, smiling. Mrs. Claus was so beautiful, though her normally bright blue eyes were looking a tad bit sad.
Pudgy, it's time for me to return home. But your mission is still going on. Santa said he would issue an order to the HSSA Red and SIA to assist you with my task. Please be good and come over here.
Alexandra knelt with her left hand on the floor with an open palm so the hedgehog could scamper into it. Once Pudgy was in position, the woman gently scooped him up in her white velvet-covered hands. She hugged Pudgy gently and then sat him back down on the floor of the room as she spoke.
I was working at Cambler Hospital. It's a little further than the distance to the tavern, but it's in the opposite direction of here. The party is supposed to be today, so there will be much to do. I believe Xylenia is outside ready to take you there. Please, make the day special for the children. They really need it.
Pudgy nodded as he spoke. Pudgy promises Mrs. Claus the party will happen and everyone will be happy. The hedgehog waved, turned to head towards the door, and watched in amazement as the door opened by itself. The hedgehog still wore his backpack and Santa hat and soon scampered outside of the room. As the hedgehog turned to wave, Mrs. Claus teleported in a cloud of white light and snowflake sparkles. The door closed shut slowly, and then Pudgy could feel the hotel change. It felt like an empty building, which meant it was time to go. The hedgehog scampered down the hallway and reached the staircase. Very carefully, Pudgy began to descend the stairs. The windows were dark, which meant the sun had not yet risen in the early morning. Moving at hedgehog speed meant that this was going to take a while. The process was sped up when Pudgy figured out how to slide down one part of the stairs. Upon reaching the first floor, the critter began to head along the wall towards the lobby. It was there a faintly shimmering woman was paying the front desk clerk and checking out of the room. It was not Mrs. Claus, but a projection of her. Pudgy marveled for a moment as he navigated around the various objects of the lobby to reach the front exterior door. The little hedgehog attempted to push the door open, but it was not budging as it was far too heavy for him to move. However, at that moment, a faint shimmer appeared beside him and pushed the door open. Pudgy exited the hotel and soon found his dragon friend Xylenia sitting outside on the sidewalk. The elf materialized beside him.
Agent 72 reporting for duty, Pudgy. We have our mission to head to Chandler Hospital and transport is ready.
Xylenia rolled her eyes as she annoyedly spoke.
The transport has a name, elf.
Pudgy laughed and scampered over to hug Xylenia. Xylenia, can you please take Pudgy and Agent 72 to the hospital? We have to help the Christmas party happen. The dragoness giggled and lowered herself so the two could climb onto her. Once each passenger was safely secured on her back, the dragoness stood and began to flap her wings.
Stop! Candler Hospital. Please hold on, you two.
The dragoness quickly took flight, and while she ascended, they began to fly over the historical buildings. Several parks in Savannah that Pudgy had wandered through passed by underneath, and soon they reached Forsyth. Agent 72 pointed as he spoke.
The main base has been dismantled and returned to the North Pole. We have 4 agents standing by, 67, 48, 23, and 99. They were given instructions by Santa and Mrs. Claus and are readying the location of the party. It is scheduled to start at 11 a.m. local time based on current estimates.
Pudgy pointed at a bank with a digital clock sign. It's 6:32 in the morning. We still have time to make it. The elf nodded, and Xylenia started to flap her wings a little bit harder. The hospital could be seen in the distance with its white stone towers and plate glass reflecting the morning sunlight from the horizon. Pudgy was excited and determined to bring Christmas to those children no matter what. Agent 72 was first to spot Xylenia's reflection in the plate glass windows, so he quickly twisted the dial on his belt and extended the optical camouflage around the dragon. Pudgy's teeth started to wiggle, and he looked at the elf who had not disappeared yet. Pudgy's teeth wiggly, what happened?
I turned on the distortion field. This way Xylenia can land without causing a stir. Your harp has the same function, so we can proceed with stealth. For obvious reasons, a flying dragon, an elf, and a hedgehog would cause difficulties if we were to be detected.
The hedgehog laughed while watching his dragon friend start to glide around the building to land. Pudgy read out the signs. Emergency, main entrance, staff entrance, deliveries. Where do we get in? The elf rubbed his chin and then pointed.
Xylenia, can you land by deliveries? We can get in through the garage loading docks.
The dragoness nodded her head and started to bank to the right. There were a series of large garage doors with trucks backed into the hospital's loading dock. Luckily for them, one garage door was open, and a large white box truck was just leaving. The dragoness started to dive in and then tuck her tail back so she could start to land. As they approached the garage door, it started to close, but Xylenia was quick enough to coast in under the door just as it shut. The dragoness landed on the polished concrete floor and slid up against a large series of crates. Pudgy looked up. Wow! Look at all these crates! Both Pudgy and his elf companion nodded as they slid from the side of the dragoness while Agent 72 spoke.
Looks like medical supplies. This one says 400 syringes per box, and there's about 2,000 on this pallet.
A quick burst of female giggles erupted from the dragon as the two were tickling her while they dismounted. Pudgy wiggled his nose as he looked up at the loading area. There were tall ceilings of corrugated white metal with large lights humming loudly. Agent 72 took out a candy cane and stuck it into one of his ears and spoke.
72 calling. Arrived on site. Loading dock.
The hedgehog started to explore, and when he could feel his teeth stop wiggling, he turned to see neither Xylenia nor the elf visible. Pudgy scampered along the edge of wooden pallets and then peeked around the edge of a stack of surgical gown boxes. Two large, burly African-American gentlemen were opening boxes and stacking a supply cart with equipment. They were wearing green uniform t-shirts with Candler Hospital on them. They also wore blue jeans, black leather steel-toed boots like COBALT wore, and security badges hanging around their necks. One was an older man with short-cut gray hair, and the other one was bald. The two were talking about the latest football game and were quite animated. Luckily, the two humans were so engrossed with their task and bantering, they did not notice the hedgehog. 72 placed a hand on the hedgehog's head and turned the white tussle ball at the end of the Santa hat. The hedgehog quickly vanished, and the wiggly filling returned to his teeth. The agent gave him a look while he watched Pudgy look up at him. "They didn't see us yet," the critter whispered, noticing that while camouflaged, Pudgy could still see a faint outline of the elf and Xylenia behind him. It was like a wireframe rigging for animation, though more sparkly with snowflakes. The elf agent was on point and led the way. Slowly and silently, the trio started to walk behind the two human workers as they pushed the cart of medical supplies through the maze-like series of boxes and crates to reach the entrance to the hospital. There were two large doors that led into the ground floor area. The signs had numbers on them, no words, and color-coded arrows that meant something. Various employees were moving carts loaded with a variety of objects, with one catching Pudgy's attention. "Look, 72, Xylenia. I think that one says children." The hedgehog's companions looked over in the direction noted and started to head towards a large four-wheeled cart with a variety of boxes on it. Pudgy scampered behind Agent 72, who was quickly reviewing a parts list stapled to the side of a box.
Floor 7, Children's Wing, Head Nurse Williams, care of Alexandra CLAUS. This is it, Mrs. Claus's supplies. She must have shipped it here via the logistics division.
Pudgy didn't know you worked with the scary delivery truck people. There are these big brown trucks that won't stop every time Pudgy tries to cross the road to COBALT's house.
What do you think the S stands for in their company name? Many Christmases ago, Santa brought the brown truck shipping company's founder a toy when he was naughty. The grateful child changed his ways and said he would do us a favor every now or then.
The hedgehog soon found himself being hoisted onto the cart, as well as Xylenia climbing on board. A tall, burly man in a green set of overalls walked up to the cart and read the manifest. The younger, muscular man with brown hair shook his head and started to push. Agent 72 jumped and soon was hanging on the front of the cart. The only empty spot not filled with boxes was now full of Xylenia and Pudgy. As the cart entered through a set of beat-up white swinging doors, the front of the cart struck the bifold doors as they began to open. Upon entering the hospital, Pudgy saw glistening white polished floors that had a silver sparkle in them. The hallways seemed to stretch as far as his eyes could see. The walls were painted a beige color with green accent lights scattered about in sconces on the walls. There was a variety of strange smells that wafted but were quickly sucked up into the air vents that dotted the corridor ceiling. Soon, the cart started to approach a gray steel service elevator with an elevator call button. The man pushing the cart let go of the cart, which continued to roll along. He jogged forward to push the button and then caught the handle. There was an LCD panel beside the door that displayed numbers in red, which indicated the floor the elevator was on. Everyone remained quiet, trying to stay hidden away and not attract attention. A hospital worker pulled out his cell phone and checked his messages. Pudgy looked up and noticed the man had a neatly cut brown beard and recognized him as the man that had gone on a date with his friend Heather. After typing a few messages, Jack started to speak to himself.
Why, yes, Heather, I will take you out for drinks after work.
The man chuckled as he put his cellular phone back into his pocket and watched as the elevator doors opened. The cart was pushed inside the service elevator, and the man pushed the button labeled 7. The trio of secret occupants of the cart watched as the gray steel doors closed. The floor shook, and a mechanical whine began as the cables pulled the car upwards. It was an old elevator that had seen many years of service and was overdue for maintenance. Pudgy noticed the faux wood paneling was starting to peel off from the walls, and there was an oily smell in the car. There was a signboard with various hospital notices, which included many workplace references and policies. The floor indicator lights lit up one by one until floor 7 was illuminated. The doors opened, and then the cart was pulled out of the elevator by Jack. The children's floor was a similar beige set of hallways and white floors, although with more colorful murals dotting the occasional section. Jack pulled the delivery cart up to where the nurse's station was and smiled at a woman in green medical scrubs who was typing on the keyboard at a rolling computer cart. She turned, removed her brown reading glasses, and let them hang around her neck.
Hello, Jack. I see you have a delivery.
Nurse Williams or Nurse Alexandra?
Oh, yes. Alexandra has been here helping for the last couple of weeks. Was talking about holding a party for the children. I wonder where she is. It's not like her to be late. Please, take the delivery over to room 10.
The nurse with the short brown hair stated while pointing down the hallway. Jack nodded and pushed the cart down as directed. Room 10 was a short distance, and as the cart was positioned through an open doorway, Pudgy could see that it was a large gathering place. When the hospital opened many years prior, This would have been a ward that could hold 20 patients. In modern days, such accommodations were frowned upon, although these places served their purposes: physical therapy, parties, emergency situations, and the occasional place for family members to spend the night when a child was sick. Jack positioned the cart in the center of the room and then turned to walk out of the room. Once the man was clear of the open doorway, Agent 72 coughed discreetly.
Agents report.
The elvish agent spoke while jumping from his perch on the cart and maneuvering to the center of the room. Elves started to materialize around the room wearing the same red and black digital camouflage, oddly enough speaking with the same voice.
67 here, 48 here, 23 here, 99 here.
Pudgy noticed that 99 and 23 were girl elves and had long white hair, braided ponytails, and light blue frosted lips. The fact they had a male voice meant that there was some sort of magic or technology at play. Agent 72 adjusted the dial on his belt and appeared standing on top of the boxes. Pudgy found the tussle of his hat, turned it, causing his distortion field to cease. His teeth finally stopped whittling, and as the critter looked up, Xylenia giggled when she appeared. The elves immediately got to work, and soon Pudgy was pressed into service. They operated like a well-oiled machine with military precision. Boxes were opened, supplies categorized, organized, and then placed. The hedgehog was scampering back and forth, moving boxes into position. The elves were using grappling guns with either hooks or suction cups and hoisted themselves up the tables to assist with the unpacking and decorating. Xylenia allowed herself to grow a tiny bit larger and then moved the boxes from the floor to the tables. The dragoness also picked up Pudgy and set him on top of a table as well. As the group worked, soon the room filled with all manner of Christmas cheer. A Christmas tree was raised quickly, and then decorations were shot onto the branches with a decoration handheld cannon. Pudgy was amazed. And what would take COBALT an hour, the elves completed in 5 minutes. The hedgehog was setting out red plates with green silverware. Pudgy was on the snack table and worried there would be no food for guests. But before he could ask, a nurse walked into the room and froze as she caught sight of Pudgy.
And what are you doing here, little guy?
Pudgy looked around and noticed that the elves and Xylenia had already disappeared. The woman walked in with a confused look on her face and stopped just shy of the edge of the table. The hedgehog waved. "Hi, my name's Pudgy." The nurse's red-painted lips opened as her jaw dropped.
You talk?
Pudgy bounced happily and waved again. "Yes, Pudgy's visiting Savannah and wanted to help Alexandra host a party. She could not come, so she sent Pudgy to help." The nurse nodded as she spoke.
I see. That explains why she's late today. May I take you to the nurse's station, if that's all right?
The hedgehog nodded and then scampered over to her hands that were resting on the table. The nurse gently scooped up the hedgehog and noticed immediately that he was so warm and soft in her hands. The young nurse giggled and then walked out of the room and back down to the large counter where several nurses were standing. The hedgehog knew what he was doing and would keep the nurses busy while the elves and Xylenia continued to set up the party. As the woman reached the others, an elderly woman with gray hair and a badge that read Director of Nursing could be seen. Her piercing blue eyes looked up from a medical record chart and locked onto Pudgy.
"Elizabeth, where did you find a porcupine?"
Pudgy wiggled his nose, and before Elizabeth could explain, spoke. "Pudgy's a hedgehog. Pudgy's helping Alexandra with the Christmas party." The director, as well as several other nurses, all turned and stared in amazement as the critter spoke to them. As Elizabeth placed Pudgy gently on the counter, Pudgy bounced and waved. Everyone saw the hedgehog was wearing a little white Santa hat with a white tussle. The director walked closer and gingerly reached out to touch Pudgy on his head. Pudgy whittled under her fingers, and she smiled as his quills were soft.
"My word! I did not think today that I would have a talking hedgehog arrive on my floor. So, why are you here, Pudgy?"
The hedgehog peeked through her fingers as he responded. "Pudgy's helping Alexandra spread Christmas cheer. She had to go home, so she sent Pudgy to be the Christmas hedgehog." The other nurses giggled, and Elizabeth smiled.
Director, would it be all right for me to take Pudgy around to the rooms?
The older nurse nodded and pointed down the hall.
"Yes, that would be all right. I am sure the patients will appreciate a Christmas hedgehog visit."
Before Elizabeth could speak, Pudgy found himself whisked away by a giggling blonde nurse who quickly walked away. Elizabeth shot her a look.
Andrea, get back here with Pudgy.
Within seconds, Andrea had taken him to a room with a little girl laying in a hospital bed. The bed was covered in pink blankets, and she was wearing a knitted cap.
Shell, look who I brought.
The little girl looked up tiredly at the nurse and then at Pudgy. The hedgehog waved. "Hello, Michelle!" Michelle started to smile.
Hi.
Andrea walked closer and gently placed Pudgy down onto the bed. The hedgehog started to scamper up and bounce happily. "My name's Pudgy. Pudgy's very glad to meet you, Michelle." Under the watchful eye of the blonde nurse, Pudgy visited with the little girl. The critter was hugged a little too tight for his liking, but it made the sick girl feel better. She did not talk much, so Pudgy did most of the talking. The critter explained that he was from Pennsylvania and lived in an underground home. He had friends who lived nearby that was a bear, a silver fox, 2 wild and crazy gray fluffy bunnies, 2 field mice, and his friend COBALT. Both the nurse and the patient listened and smiled at the wonderful story. When it was time for Pudgy to go, Michelle started to whimper, but Andrea was quick thinking.
No. Don't cry, Michelle. You'll see Pudgy later for a surprise.
Without warning, Pudgy found himself whisked away again. The new room was across the hall with a little boy who had broken his arm and leg. They had been placed in fresh casts. Pudgy introduced himself, and the little boy was excitedly explaining to Pudgy how he landed a neat skateboard trick and broke a few bones. The critter nodded and listened, and then explained about his travels throughout the city. The conversation was way more animated, especially when Pudgy talked about the chocolate store he visited. Elizabeth tapped Andre on the shoulder, and the 2 women giggled while exchanging a look. After explaining why Pudgy had to go, Elizabeth took the hedgehog and then visited another 10 rooms worth of patients. Every child was excited to get a visit from the Christmas hedgehog, and gossip was spreading throughout the floor of an upcoming secret visit later. After many visits and a trip past the nursing station to check in, the female nurse walked back to room 10. A large gathering of women were wide-eyed and pointing, almost blocking the doors to enter the wardroom. Pudgy watched as the room started to appear through the open doorway, while Elizabeth navigated the crowd of astonished nurses. The tables were decorated with fine red and green tablecloths. All manner of yummy food was out on platters, including a cookie table with one more marvelous than the next. There was a Christmas tree in the center of the room, fully decorated and twinkling with lights. 20 presents were under the tree, wrapped in silver sparkle paper and red bows. The astonished nurse looked down at Pudgy.
What is going on?
Pudgy wiggled in her hands. Pudgy's one of many helpers. Can the kids come to the party now? The director was standing beside the tree.
You heard the hedgehog. Bring the children.
Elizabeth smiled, quickly walked over to the director and handed Pudgy. The older woman smiled and hugged the critter gently while walking around the room and marveled at all the decorations.
Alexandra is special. She comes every other year here to Candler Hospital. The children look forward to it each Christmas. Sadly, though, some never make it.
Pudgy looked up as the director's eyes turned sad. The hedgehog looked confused and listened while she gently petted him.
We treat broken bones and tonsillectomies, but it's the cancer and terminal diseases that are hard to treat. We try to help as much as we can, make them comfortable, and help their parents when they pass.
Pudgy started to whimper and hugged her white coat-covered arm. The director shook her head.
Shh, now. I'm sorry for bringing up such sad memories. Let's put on a happy face. Here come the children.
Children started to appear dressed in fluffy white hospital robes, being pushed in wheelchairs. Their faces soon were filled with joy and excitement as they marveled at the wondrous decorations. In some cases, like Michelle from earlier, they were pushed into the room by the nurses still in their hospital beds. The beds were on wheels, with saline and medication bags hanging from poles attached to the beds, with intravenous lines still attached to the children's arms. With the hospital beds lined up against the left side of the room, the beds were soon connected to a myriad of electrical plugs along the walls. The children in their beds smiled and so desperately wanted to run over to the tree, but they were too weak to move. Their smiling faces said more than any words could say, and the joy being expressed made Pudgy happy. The director walked around the room carrying the hedgehog, inspecting the beds, until she was satisfied that the children were safely settled.
Everyone, Alexandra could not make it today, but it appears Pudgy and some magical helpers still were able to make this party happen. Now, who's hungry?
The children in their wheelchairs soon were at the wonderful snack table and filled their plates with food. There was always a watchful nurse to ensure they did not take too much, since there were many children there. A curious little girl with pigtails wheeled over to the tree with silver presents, finding one with her name on it.
Oh, Andrea, can I open my present?
The blonde nurse walked over and noticed each of the silver presents had a child's name on it. She had thought they were just decorations, but they were in fact real. Smiling as she responded,
I think we should wait till everyone eats.
As more children started to notice the presents, a similar question was soon floating around the room. The ones in their hospital beds were served by the nurses since they were unable to walk. The director smiled and visited with each child before reaching Michelle once again. The little girl looked up at her.
Can Pudgy stay with me for a little while?
The head nurse nodded, located, and then placed the hedgehog onto the bed. The critter scampered up to sit beside the sick little girl, and he looked up at the older woman. Pudgy wondering, what's wrong with Michelle? The little girl petted Pudgy gently as she whispered,
I have cancer, Pudgy, and I am here for treatment.
Yes, that is right. Today was chemotherapy day, so she is weaker than normal. This was the last course, which is the strongest. Hopefully with time you will feel better, and we can discharge you.
Pudgy started to hug Michelle, looking sadly up at her. As Elizabeth stopped by with a plate of cheese, crackers, and cookies, she noticed Pudgy hugging the patient and looking sad.
Hey now, what's the sad face for, Pudgy?
The hedgehog whimpered, She has cancer. Pudgy's sad. The woman's expression changed to a soft smile.
Yes, but it is treatable. She should recover and be in remission in a couple of weeks. Now please do not be sad,
the nurse said while petting the hedgehog. Pudgy nodded and then watched as Michelle was nibbling on a piece of cheese. The two watched as the nurses also began to nibble on small plates of goodies. There was enough food to feed everyone, and even a tiny bit left over for the janitors. The janitors kept washing the floors outside of the ward, looking in, wanting to join in on the fun too, but they still had to work. As a small radio played Christmas music, someone started singing Must Be Santa Claus. Pudgy had never heard an up-tempo version with an accordion, but the song, plus sugar, was resulting in bouncing children. Michelle's neighbor was a slightly older girl who was busy watching Pudgy.
Michelle, can Pudgy come visit me now?
The little girl nodded, patted Pudgy, made a small wave, and pointed to her left towards a hospital bed beside her. The name Lily was clearly visible in a name card holder. The hedgehog hugged Michelle again and nodded while scampering across the bed. The two beds were close to one another, so with the girls watching, the hedgehog started to run as fast as he could to jump the gap between. The hedgehog was almost clear across the gap between the beds when he started to fall. Catching the edge of a bed sheet, Pudgy started climbing back up. When Pudgy reached Lily's feet, the two little girls cheered. The hedgehog scampered up to Lily and bounced happily. Hi, my name's Pudgy. The African-American girl smiled and petted Pudgy gently with her heavily taped-up hand with a myriad of IV lines attached to the back of her hand and arm. Pudgy noticed the bandages across her belly, and he started to frown. The little girl's hazel eyes locked onto his, and her lips curled into a smile.
Do not worry, Pudgy. I was just here for appendix surgery. I am fine. It turns out I did not need one anyway. Can you tell me a story?
Pudgy nodded and started to tell her about his first big adventure where he went to the center of the earth. The little girl's eyes went wide, and soon her neighbors were struggling to hear and asking Pudgy to repeat. A nurse walked by and attached a small microphone to Pudgy's quills. Each bed had audio speakers on it and could work with the nurse microphone packs. With each bed configured, Pudgy began telling his story again from the beginning. The tale was grand and had scary parts about how the dragon had first tried to eat him, and then turned out to be a good friend. The kind man who lived in the center of the earth in a grand castle and his silly magical powers. Soon the whole room was listening to the grand tale of how Pudgy traveled to the North Pole, met Santa, and helped save the day. When Pudgy finished each story, the children cheered and the nurses clapped, but soon the patience could not last any longer, and the presents were passed out. While Pudgy was singing hedgehog versions of Christmas carols, the children started to open their exquisitely wrapped silver presents. Pudgy watched as Michelle opened up her present and pulled out a brown wig. Elizabeth smiled.
Do you want me to help you put it on?
Michelle nodded and took off her knitted cap to reveal her bald head. The chemotherapy drugs had caused her hair to fall out, so Pudgy soon understood why she received this present. The sick child was soon wearing the wig and smiling ear to ear. Lily smiled at her from the bed beside her.
Oh, Michelle, that looks wonderful.
Pudgy nodded and bounced happily while Lily opened her present, finding a doll dressed as a nurse. Lily smiled.
Thank you, Santa. I love my doll.
There were many children calling out, "Thank you, Santa!" With the food eaten and the presents unwrapped, the children started to look sleepy. The director nodded and quietly motioned to start taking the children back to their rooms. Pudgy was soon scooped up by a man dressed in a nurse outfit and then carried over to the director. The man handed Pudgy to her and spoke.
Here you go, Director. Pudgy, it was nice to meet you, but I have to head out on my rounds.
The brown-haired man waved and exited the room. The director stood by the doors and let Pudgy say goodbye to each child who passed. The children in the wheelchairs left first, and all were excitedly playing with their presents, although holding back yawns as best as they could. The large beds were unlocked from their positions and disconnected from the walls. One by one, the beds were wheeled past with children waving at Pudgy. The hedgehog waved back and said, "Merry Christmas!" to each one. Lily and Michelle were last to leave, with Michelle already asleep in her bed. She was still wearing her wig with a knitted tussle cap lying beside her hand. The Christmas tree was still standing, twinkling and casting a soft light into the room. The older woman looked down at Pudgy.
I need to go on rounds as well, so I will leave you here, Pudgy. I will be back later, and we can figure out what to do with you next.
The director walked over and sat Pudgy down in front of the Christmas tree, stood back up, smiled, while putting her outfit back into its proper placement. The older nurse walked out of the room, while the two janitors walked past the doorway again.
Jen, Larry, there is food left over. Please help yourselves.
Janitors dressed in their green overalls with the hospital logos smiled and walked into the room. The unwrapped present paper was already put into a pile, and the disposable plates had been placed neatly in the trash. In terms of cleanup, this would be a snap. However, 2 plates of food were placed on a table for each janitor. They watched the scampering hedgehog around the tree skirt at the base of the Christmas tree. To their amazement, he disappeared suddenly.
Jen, where did the hedgehog go?
The young bald man said while nibbling on a cookie. The woman shook her head as they both smiled, and she nibbled on her food next to the twinkling tree.
Larry? I don't know. Maybe he went back to the North Pole.
What had occurred was that Agent 72 stealthily maneuvered around the room to reach Pudgy to activate his optical camouflage. When the hedgehog felt his teeth wiggly, Pudgy knew he had gone invisible once more. The shimmering elf was standing beside him and motioned to follow. Nodding, the two scampered along the edge of the room and then out through the doors. The two remained quiet as they maneuvered the hallways until they reached an alcove where spare-wheeled stands for IV equipment were standing. The elf patted Pudgy on his shoulder.
Good work, Pudgy. When you left with the nurse, you allowed us time to finish setting up and allowed the other elves to teleport back home. Xylenia is waiting outside on the patio where the hospital staff smoke. Now, let's head out and keep quiet while stealth.
Nurses, please be on the lookout. Pudgy has disappeared. There are also leftovers, which you are welcome to help yourselves.
Pudgy nodded, following the elf while the ceiling-mounted speakers called out a message from the director of nursing. The little hedgehog wished he could have said goodbye to the nice nurses, but he knew the elf was correct that it was best to leave now. As the minutes passed, Agent 72 led Pudgy further down the hallway. There were painted, colored lines on the floor which directed you to go this way to surgery, this way to x-ray, and this way to the cafeteria. They were following the orange line and soon turned down the hallway to see a set of glass doors appear. The doors opened automatically when something crossed the light beam at the bottom of the doorway. However, while camouflaged, the doors would not open. Before Pudgy could say anything, he watched Agent 72 pick up a discarded empty pack of cigarettes and position it in the invisible light beam, resulting in the door to open. The two quickly darted through the sliding glass doors before they closed once more. As the little critter gasped while catching his breath, the elf patted him on his head once more.
Pudgy, I must take my leave now. It was a pleasure to meet and work with you.
Pudgy bounced happily and gave his elf friend a hug. Pudgy, glad to meet and work with you too, Agent 72. The elf laughed, returned the hug, released the embrace, and then disappeared in a blinding flash of snowflake sparkles while stepping backwards. Pudgy rubbed his eyes with his paws, calling out, "Xylenia, where are you?" The shimmering, sparkly dragon outline giggled as she waved from behind a wooden bench.
Over here, Pudgy. Are you ready to go now?
The hedgehog scampered over and hugged his dragon friend. Xylenia giggled as she helped her little friend up onto her back. When the critter was safely strapped in, the dragoness started to flap her wings. The magic that had created the camouflage was drained, and it was not long until both the hedgehog and dragon appeared as Xylenia flew around the building. Children in their rooms were pointing excitedly towards the windows, as well as many nurses staring with mouths open. All were dumbstruck as they watched an ever-increasing dragon fly by with a tiny hedgehog on its back. With the hospital slowly diminishing in size as Xylenia flew higher into the skies above, she returned to her normal size. Pudgy watched as they approached thick clouds overhead, and there was an occasional rumble of thunder, which the hedgehog hoped his dragoness friend could get above before the storm started to rain. As tense minutes passed, the gray puffy clouds turned black around them. The dragoness was just able to navigate the skies and get above the cloud deck as the flashes of lightning were dotting the clouds below them. The hedgehog nodded and settled in for a long flight. Pudgy did not worry with Xylenia flying and watched as Savannah City proper disappeared. The sun quickly set on the western horizon, and soon the night sky was filled with stars as far as the eye could see. Pudgy watched the moon with its craters float in the skies above, and hoped the moon dinosaurs were all right. The critter wondered, would he ever meet them again someday? As questions filled his mind, the hedgehog's eyes grew heavy, and he quickly fell asleep. Xylenia could not help but smile as she flew, and continued to stay level with the curved horizon. She had several hours of flight time ahead of her, so she did not want to overdo it. South Carolina gave way to North Carolina, and then turned into Virginia. With the night skies, the only thing she could see was the dots of lights from the human cities and towns strung below her like Christmas lights. After many hours passed, Xylenia could see the outlines of Pudgy's forest appearing as the sun was starting to rise. The morning twilight filled the skies with a myriad of blue and orange colors. Pudgy was just starting to wake up and saw Mr. Bear's cabin passing below them. The forest was covered in snow, with ice hanging from tree limbs. "Oh boy, we made it home! Xylenia, can you stay a while?" The tired dragon nodded as she called out.
Yes, most definitely I can stay, Pudgy. The letter will call me when I need to return, but first things first, I need the land.
The hedgehog held on and felt his dragon friend lower her tail. The dragon's body pitched backwards, and soon she was coming in to land in front of the hedgehog's underground home. With a couple of bounces, Xylenia landed and started to jog until she could come to a complete stop. Once it was safe, Pudgy hopped from Xylenia's back and then scampered up to his underground home's front door. After working the lock, the critter opened the door and headed inside. The inside of his home was cold, and he knew he had to start a fire soon. But first, he had to let Xylenia inside. The hedgehog scurried through his home, turning lights on, and opened the interior door into the big meeting room. Heading over to the tiny hedgehog-sized controls, Pudgy started to turn the wheels to cause the big bifold door to open. As they swung inwards, the cold winter air blew into the home, further chilling the interior. Pudgy watched as his dragon friend started to shrink down to a size that would fit within the home. Xylenia walked in through the doorway, and turned around, sitting beside the banquet seat in the big meeting room. The dragoness smiled and watched her little friend work the controls to shut the doors once more. In a couple of minutes, the door was closed and the LED light above filled the room with a white light. Pudgy pointed to the newly installed heater that COBALT had put in. Xylenia, COBALT put the heater in. Pudgy thinks you pushed the button to light it. The dragon nodded and started to carefully push the igniter button. Soon, a set of blue flames were dancing inside the glass enclosure. The hedgehog nodded and then went inside his home to start a fire in his wood stove. The logs placed, kindling lit. Soon the fire was starting to catch inside the firebox. As the warmth started to spread throughout the cold home, plans were made to cook breakfast. The hedgehog needed to tell COBALT he was home too. After securing the door of the wood stove, he went to check on his friend once more. The dragon had curled up in the big room and had fallen asleep. Nodding to himself, the critter went to the side of the banquet and opened the side panel door that COBALT had installed. There was a blue blanket inside, and with much effort, Pudgy was able to pull it outside to the room. The critter started to try to cover the dragon with the blanket, but he was having trouble, until the half-asleep dragon grabbed the cover and soon was mostly covered by the thick blue blanket. She also instinctively reached out for Pudgy and pulled him in for a hug. The dragoness mumbled a Merry Christmas as she fell asleep once more. The hedgehog smiled and snuggled with her, saying, Merry Christmas, Xylenia. Breakfast could wait for a little while, and soon he too felt his eyelids grow heavy and quickly fell asleep. Pudgy was home once more with his dragon friend. Little did Pudgy know, in a short time, there would be more holiday cheer to spread. When Pudgy woke, he could hear something tapping as the hedgehog wiped away the sleep from his eyes. He saw that Xylenia had rolled over in her blanket. Pudgy sat up on the cold concrete floor and heard the tapping sound once more. It was coming from his front door, so the hedgehog scampered through his home and peeked out of the round kitchen window. He saw a large brown fur-covered leg standing there. Just a minute, Mr. Bear! Pudgy called out as he headed to open his front door. After opening the door and lifting the storm door, the hedgehog peeked out. The large brown bear was standing there and wearing a Santa hat.
Hello, Pudgy. Did I wake you?
Pudgy bounced happily as he looked up at his large brown bear friend grinning. Xylenia just brought Pudgy back home this morning, so we were napping.
Oh yes, your dragon friend. I remember her. Where did you go, Pudgy?
The hedgehog waved and started to tell the epic tale of his trip to Savannah and back. The bear listened and grinned while the cool wind blew through the trees above in the forest, causing the branches to clatter. After the story concluded, the brown bear nodded.
I am glad your latest adventure worked out, Pudgy. Hey, the reason I was stopping by is that I have a question for you. I am hosting a Christmas party in a couple days on Wednesday. Would you like to come?
While the bear spoke, the Santa hat's tussle ball dropped to the right side of the bear's jaw. He blew out of the side of his mouth and rocked his head so that it would tuck back behind his ear. The critter started bouncing even more excitedly. Pudgy would love to come to Mr. Bear's house for a party. Can COBALT, Xylenia, Argente, the bunnies, the beavers, and the field mice come too?
Yes, they are all invited and have already said they were coming. I talked to COBALT yesterday. He will be helping with the cooking. I have attended many of your parties, so this time you just come and enjoy yourself at my home. I look forward to seeing you as well as your dragon friend at the party.
Mr. Bear waved his paw at Pudgy and started to walk slowly through the forest back towards his home. As Pudgy waved until he was out of view, he lowered the storm door and then shut his front door. Inside, Xylenia was peeking through the interior door that led into the big room. Pudgy waved and called over to his dragon friend. Mr. Bear invited us to a Christmas party on Wednesday. The dragoness nodded as she curled back up to fall asleep once more. The hedgehog scampered over to his wood stove, loaded a couple more logs, and started to cook breakfast. As the hours passed, the critter stayed quiet as best as he could, and it was not until late As the sun started to set when his dragon friend woke up, Pudgy had texted COBALT on his phone letting him know that he had returned and of the party invite. Occasional buzzing was heard from the phone as a message would be sent or received. Pudgy scampered inside the big room and helped his dragon friend untangle herself from the blanket. The hedgehog removed the leather saddlebags and harness straps from her. The dragoness whittled and smiled, as it felt particularly good to have them removed. Pudgy investigated the bags and found the food stuff that COBALT had packed was still inside, as well as another $20 bill. After retrieving and putting away some of the traveling supplies, Pudgy returned to Xylenia, eating a stick of summer sausage. Pudgy brought her a cup of tea as well as crackers from inside of his home. She hungrily ate, and then asked Pudgy if it would be all right for her to go outside. The hedgehog agreed and opened the round doors. Pudgy twitched his nose as he saw Xylenia hop over the door jamb and then run behind a cluster of bushes. The snows had been melting, and while still present in the forest, much of the brown-packed leaf-covered ground had returned to view. Pudgy could see bear tracks in the mud, so he knew his larger friend was nearby. Soon, he watched Xylenia walk out from behind the bushes and was stretching her wings out. As she approached the big round door opening, she looked around and spoke.
You have a wonderful home, Pudgy. I am glad you have a big place that I can stay in now. But what happened to your cabin again?
Oh, when Pudgy went to the moon, the rocket blew up the cabin.
Okay, I need to hear that story again.
As his dragon friend re-entered the home, Pudgy started to shut the bifold doors. The hedgehog made tea and then began to tell the grand story from the point after he saved Santa last year. His dragon friend asked many questions and they talked late into the night until both felt the need to sleep return once more. Night turned into day, then night once more. Stories were told, goodies were baked, then eaten, and laughter echoed throughout the home. Argente stopped by every day for stories and goodies once she became aware of the hedgehog's return. It was almost in a blink of an eye that Wednesday morning came, which meant everyone within the forest was excitedly getting ready for the Christmas party at Mr. Bear's house. Pudgy woke up so excited that he could hardly stay still. Xylenia giggled while watching the little hedgehog start to put on his white Santa hat and scampering into the big room. His bear friend did not say exactly what time the party was to start, so he was getting ready now. On the way there, the hedgehog could show his dragon friend where Argente and the others lived. After working the door controls to allow Xylenia to exit, the critter shut the big set of bifold doors to seal the room once more. Scampering back inside, shutting the interior door, checking on his wood stove, Pudgy ensured everything was secure before exiting his home, locking the front door, and lowering the storm door. Scampering up the Xylenia side, Pudgy waved at her and called out, "Let Pudgy show you where Argente lives. COBALT built her a nice cottage to live in up the hill from here." The dragoness nodded and walked slowly behind the scurrying hedgehog. Pudgy pointed out the secret tunnel that had been built when the monsters came to the forest, which drew a small tinge of sadness from his friend. Soon, a small cottage appeared that was partially embedded into the hillside. There was a round crossbar window painted white, located beside a yellow door with a round top and a tiny circle of glass in the middle. An exterior porch light was next to the door, along with a pull chain doorbell. The hedgehog gently pulled the chain, which caused the bell to ding inside of her home. Soon, a smiling silver fox was peeking out of the front door glass, and then the door opened.
Hello, Pudgy. Are you excited for the party too?
Argente said as she poked her head out of the door and waved a paw at Xylenia. The dragoness waved back while peeking into the home. Unlike Pudgy's home, this was plainer on the inside, but that was by design as the silver fox had trouble working certain types of controls. COBALT had made it as fox-friendly as he could, which was appreciated by Argente and her other forest guests that stopped by for a visit. Across the clearing was the bunny's warren, which was covered with a series of pale stones. They too had a wooden door, although theirs was orange. Pudgy pointed, and before he could even speak, the silver fox responded.
A couple of weeks ago when COBALT stopped by, we were visited by pouting bunnies who wanted a door too.
The group laughed while said orange door opened as two gray and fluffy bunnies hopped out. After shutting their door, they bounced over in front of Argente's house. The bunnies started hugging Pudgy excitedly while bouncing around Xylenia looking up at her. The dragoness smiled all the while, happy to meet all of Pudgy's friends. There was also another tiny wood door nearby which opened when the field mice exited their underground home. The mice waved at Pudgy and then scurried down to sit beside Argente's front paws. They bashfully peeked at the dragoness from behind Fox Paws, which drew a smile and a laugh from all those in attendance. Argente exited her home, secured her door, and whittled her ears as Pudgy turned to everyone and called out, "Okay, let's go to Mr. Bear's cabin for the party!" Soon, a parade was being led by Pudgy through the forest, down the path, past Pudgy's house, and then to the beaver pond. The beavers had just swum out from their underground mound and were shaking the water off from the pond. While they did not get a hug due to their current wet state, everyone waved hello, and then the parade continued. Down the creek they walked and climbed down beside the waterfalls as the creek descended the hills through the forest. Further they went until they reached the trail to Mr. Bear's house. Up the path they walked, reaching a large granite boulder that was split and scorched. While Pudgy stopped to catch his breath, Xylenia examined the granite boulder.
So, this is where you found the coins and sword hilt?
Yes, and then the ghost soldiers started to appear. I hope they never come back.
The field mice were riding on Argente's back as they could hardly keep up. Soon the bunnies were hopping circles around Pudgy, excitedly wanting to continue. The dragoness laughed and could just barely see a cabin further up the hill. The assembled group started to walk once more up a much steeper path worn down from much usage by the local animals. A myriad of deer tracks were in the dirt, as well as many large bear prints. Mr. Bear's stacked log cabin with cedar shingled roof came into view, complete with windows painted a deep hunter green with similar cedar shutters that flanked the windows. A huge stacked stone chimney was puffing full bore with wood smoke. All sorts of yummy smells wafted in the air, which caused the group to sniff their noses. COBALT had already arrived and brought not only the big blue cooler, but the red cooler as well. Both had wheels and were sitting on the covered front porch. The human was in the process of stringing Christmas lights around the porch railings when he looked up and waved at the group of approaching animals.
Hello, everyone. Merry Christmas. Hey, Mr. Bear, everyone's here.
What had been an orderly parade descended into a scattering race of critters heading to the cabin. Xylenia beat everyone, as she was the biggest, and then started looking at the brightly glowing lights. They were LED bulbs, which meant they gave off little to no heat and were bright despite the gray sky overhead. Pudgy peeked over the steps. "Hi, COBALT!" The man called backwards towards an open window to alert the bear. The human was using zip ties to secure the lights to the railings and then clipped the tail edges off of the plastic leads with a set of pliers. The cabin's green front door opened and a large brown bear walked out waving a paw at his visitors.
Merry Christmas. Welcome to my home.
The critters all began to bounce up the steps, hugging Mr. Bear, thanking him for letting them come over to the party. Everyone laughed, allowing the bear to return to his kitchen while following behind. The guests looked in amazement at the cabin. The ceilings were vaulted with wood beams stained with a golden oak varnish. Lights hung from the ceiling on silver chains, with the electrical wires wrapped inside the links. The cabin's interior log walls were recently painted to show off the timbers. There were hallways wide enough to accommodate the bear, which led to a couple rooms in the rear of the cabin. The doors were shut to the rooms, and everyone was respectful of their host's wish for privacy. The living area did not have any furniture because no human-built furniture could support the bear's general disposition. There were many large, fluffy floor pillows scattered about in a variety of colors. Xylenia giggled as she looked around, sniffing towards the kitchen, as the bear smiled and extended his paw to her.
Hello, I believe your name is Xylenia.
The dragoness giggled as she took his paw.
Yes, I do not believe we have met before, Mr. Bear.
With introductions made, the group saw the fireplace was roaring with a huge fire and the largest ham that anyone had ever seen roasting over it. COBALT had somehow maneuvered around the assembled gathering to baste it with something that fizzled. Pudgy called out, "Which glaze are you using this year, COBALT?"
Caramel glaze.
A cheap and easy way to glaze a ham is to use soda pop. It does not matter the brand, as all would work, although some offered a more unique flavor than others. Black enamel pots were bubbling in the white oven, and silver pots on the stove, with pictures of the bear's family hanging around the kitchen. There was a large television set hanging on the wall opposite from the kitchen, although it was off. Today was a party day, and the silly people on TV can wait till tomorrow. Everyone was laughing and talking at once, while both Cobalt and Mr. Bear began to place foods upon a low table. Pudgy kept a watchful eye on the beavers, who really wanted to nibble on the cabin and all its lovely wood logs. But the beavers were guests here and did not want their host to be cross with them. Their temptations were placated when Cobalt handed the excited beavers sticks covered in maple syrup. That was a hit the last party, and the beavers bounced excitedly as they munched away. A line of critters formed as Cobalt helped Mr. Bear serve those in attendance. There were the candied carrots from Thanksgiving that the bunnies enjoyed, as well as scalloped potatoes in a white sauce, several kinds of vegetables that had been cooked and spread out in a holiday bowl, forming a rainbow on the table. The ham was taken off the spit and placed onto a wire rack inside of a large roasting pan bottom and cooling down. All manner of baked items were spread out around the room, breads and cookies and pies and things that Pudgy didn't recognize. Dinner was being served and each animal was given a nice plate of food to munch upon. They thanked Cobalt and Mr. Bear and soon sat at various places around the cabin's interior. Pudgy got a tiny piece of ham for his plate while Argente got a nice slice. After Xylenia, Mr. Bear and Cobalt served themselves, and there was a huge haunch of ham remaining. Mr. Bear sat on his rear in his usual spot and then started to munch upon the thick slice of ham the man had cut. Cobalt found a place to sit near the door on the floor cushion, said a belated grace for the food, and started to eat. Pudgy sat beside his human friend while bouncing happily as he munched upon many wonderful goodies. All the animals made many trips to the buffet table for food and were having a wonderful time. After a couple hours, the food was eaten, save for the myriad of wonderful cookies. The refined sugars were starting to kick in, and the bunnies were hopping circles around Xylenia and Cobalt. Rubbing his chin, Cobalt came up with a plan. It would be the first annual Christmas party scavenger hunt. After making a list of objects, which included pine cones, flat stones, an orange leaf, and a Christmas cookie, the critters all scattered around to look for the objects. Xylenia sat with Cobalt on the front porch, while Mr. Bear started to clean up inside. The dragoness sighed happily.
It is so nice here. I don't want to leave yet.
I know you must get back to the North Pole, but please tell Pudgy and the others you're leaving first. They'll be sad if you do not. After all the terrible things that have happened as of late, this was a welcome respite.
The man smiled and rubbed the back of her scaled neck, while the dragoness nodded and leaned in close to hug him. Xylenia whispered into Cobalt's ear.
If it gets too bad, I'll come back.
Her tongue flicked out like a snake and tickled his ear.
It tickles. Okay. Thank you, Xylenia.
It was not long until there was a stream of bouncing critters returning with their various scavenger hunt items. With all items collected, the prize was a hug from Cobalt and a little sparkly present from Mr. Bear. Some boxes, like the field mice's, needed to be done by Cobalt with tweezers, as the bear's claws could not wrap that small. One by one, they opened their party favors, and everyone had a spiffy Christmas scarf to wear. As the animals donned their scarves, they hugged Mr. Bear while singing Christmas carols. A dragon roar added a unique flair, resulting in much laughter. As the hours passed, the sun started to set, and the animals began to depart the cabin to head back to their respective homes. Xylenia turned to Mr. Bear.
Mr. Bear, you have a wonderful home, and this was a spectacular party. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I am glad you were able to come. I believe I will be hosting this again next year and hope you will be able to come once more.
The dragoness soon found the hedgehog hugging her leg and looking up at her sadly. Xylenia scooped up Pudgy and hugged him properly and spoke softly.
Yes, Pudgy, I need to go now. I must get back to the North Pole. You remember how busy Christmas night is? Plus, my mother will be worrying herself silly.
Pudgy hugged his friend, and soon the dragon was being hugged by Cobalt and Argente as well. The large brown bear smiled as he sat on his porch waving his paw at her.
Goodbye, Xylenia. I hope your travel home is safe and uneventful.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. Argente, it was a pleasure to meet you as well. Could you please keep an eye on Pudgy while I'm away?
I did try. He gets into these moods and there's no talking him out of helping.
The group laughed as they began to let go of the dragon. Xylenia set Pudgy down on the porch and then started to walk out to the grassy area that surrounded the cabin. The dragoness turned, waved, and called out,
Goodbye, everyone. I can't wait to see you again next Christmas.
The dragoness started to flap her wings and soon was hovering in the air a good distance from the ground. Xylenia circled the cabin with a happy roar and then flew off towards the northern skies. Mr. Bear, Pudgy, Argente, and Cobalt were waving and yelling their goodbyes. Pudgy sniffled his nose when he could no longer see his dragon friend, but soon was hugged by Argente. The porch grew quiet with a soft glow of Christmas lights illuminating the area. Cobalt turned and shook Mr. Bear's paw.
Wonderful party, Mr. Bear. I'm glad I could help. I will be taking Pudgy and Argente back home before returning to mine. Merry Christmas.
The large brown bear smiled as the man put Pudgy and Argente on top of each cooler to ride. The plastic wheels squeaked a tiny bit as they turned while being pulled by Cobalt. Soon the cabin was quiet once more, and the bear turned to enter his home. The door was shut, and after some party cleanup, a long winter's nap was in order. Cobalt passed the granite boulder, made a left, and was walking up the creek. The now empty coolers rocked back and forth, causing Argente and Pudgy to hop off from them, since it was too hard to ride any further. Pudgy climbed onto a silver fox friend's back, and then she walked beside Cobalt in the ever-darkening forest. The skies were still cloudy, and the occasional snowflake fell from the skies above. In a couple of minutes, the trio had reached the hedgehog's underground home. Cobalt knelt to hug the hedgehog and Silver Fox one at a time while he spoke.
Merry Christmas, Pudgy. Merry Christmas, Argente. You two sleep well, and tomorrow night you can come over to my house if you would like. I bought many cookies. And a cheesecake, too.
The two critters bounced happily while returning Cobalt's hug. They accepted the invitation excitedly, and the Silver Fox padded off silently through the woods to head back to her home. The hedgehog looked up at his friend Cobalt while wiggling his nose and said, Pudgy hopes these quiet days last a while.
I do too, Pudgy, for everyone's sakes. I hope next year is happy and safe. Good night, Pudgy.
The hedgehog yawned sleepily as his human friend placed him down beside the front door of his underground home. Good night, Cobalt, the tired hedgehog said as he opened the storm door, then the interior door, and entered his home. After turning on the lights, he secured the doors and headed over to his wood stove. By the time Pudgy had a fire going, Cobalt had already crossed the forest and disappeared behind a thorn bush as he returned to his home across the forest. Pudgy washed himself, turned off the lights, and climbed into bed, and got under all the covers. As the hedgehog started to fall asleep, he whispered, Merry Christmas, everyone.